Hello, and welcome to this quick guided meditation to slow down and be grateful. I'm Sarah Raymond with the Mindful Movement. I'm grateful you have joined me today. It is so easy to become swept up in the seemingly relentless demands of a busy life. In doing this, you might find that you lose focus on the present, or you might feel as though you don't have the time to stop and appreciate life's gifts. It is true that meditation is a practice, and it can create change when you make the time to practice it. But even when you are short on time, it is important to prioritize what matters most. You can always find time to be mindful, even if just for a few minutes. You might find that closing your eyes to tune out the outside world for a moment makes it easier to bring your awareness inside. So you may choose to close your eyes now. And let's begin this practice with some gentle breathing. Notice the rhythm of your natural breath. Take in a slow breath and experience the gentle rise and fall of your chest. Our breath is constant and reliable. It tethers us at all times to the present moment. Just by tuning in to the steady rhythm of your breath, you are immersing yourself in the energy of life, the energy that propels you forward and connects you to all other life on this planet. Observe whether your mind is in another place or if it is here right now. Can you allow yourself to let go of your thoughts for a moment? Can you allow your mind to be silent, except for hearing the sound of your breath? Now, notice where you are carrying tension in your body. Can you allow your clenching muscles to let go? Ask yourself, how do you feel in this very moment? Can you sense the peaceful energy of life flowing through you, invigorating you with every breath? You are the embodiment of this lively energy. Your body is a miracle and a gift, the vehicle through which you have the privilege of experiencing this beautiful world. Take a moment now to find something or someone to appreciate. Sense the feeling of gratitude within you. And send it outward to the world around you. In a moment, you will open your eyes and come out of this state of stillness and peace. But do your best to move forward with your day with a residual feeling of gratitude. As you continue on with your day, I challenge you to continue cultivating gratitude. Perhaps you can even find something positive out of an experience that seems negative at first. Now, we will end this practice with a deep breath, breathing in love and breathing out eternal appreciation. Thank you for practicing with me today. I am grateful that you did. I hope you have a joyful day.
All right, so that's our mindfulness meditation. I hope it allowed you to relax for a bit, no? Think about the good things that we receive in life and cultivate gratitude. It's also good because it reminds us of the people who probably are the reasons why we are choosing to be here, no? Maybe there are our source of strength and inspiration, and we want them to, of course, um, through our efforts, we want them to be happy, or probably if they are your students, you want to become more competent and help them. Ayan. So ito yung um, mga goals natin. Very good kung magiging clear sa atin bakit ba natin talaga ito ginagawa o bakit tayo nandito. Okay, and ako naman nandito to review you for psychological testing. Ayan. So last May, no, we were able to um, rationalize the 100-item question that we provided during the diagnostic exam. And right now, we're going to discuss more about them, the context and the concepts of psychological testing, assessment and evaluation, and hopefully, you also have your pen and paper with you. Do you have them right now? Or if not, kahit po cellphone. Ayan. Because we're going to have some activities later. And by the way, I'm going to upload the review materials right after this po, ha? Tapos, susunod ulit. Magdadagdag ako ng magdadagdag. Okay. Ayan. Sige po. Alright. So, we're already done with this exercise. Before we start nga, can you mention some of the things that you were thinking of while we're having the mindfulness exercise, or the things that we're grateful for? Pwede po ba natin ma-send sa chat para may konting interaction lang tayo muna? And ma-feel ko din na gising-gising na tayo. Baka lalong inantok, no? Sa mindfulness exercise. Mm-mm. Wow, oo nga 'no. Sometimes we can be thankful for good things and big things, 'di ba? But we can also be thankful for little things na, buti na lang nandito ako, ayan, na-relax. Buti naman Sir Dave. Actually, I know 'no, maybe the pressure is a bit stronger now, especially that it's already July. And come to think of it, malapit na. Ayan, but you're choosing to overcome, 'di ba? By reviewing. Ayan, by instead of just worrying, you're doing something proactive. Ayan, may nag-share din sa chat box. Ayan, we're thankful for the people, for our family members. Ayan. So habang iniisip natin sila, ayan, isipin natin sila bilang inspirasyon, no? Na maaabot natin yung mga pangarap natin. Okay. So what's our coverage? Thank you po sa lahat po nang nag-share. What's our coverage for this review? session, of course, we're going to talk about the meaning, nature, and development of psychological testing. But we'll I think we'll have another round of activity for the history part of psych testing because I feel I have to provide you with the review materials first, no, before we do that activity. Another is we're going to have some models and theories used in testing. It has to be part 3, part 2, and 3. And psychological tests that's commonly used in the Philippines. All right. So before we start, I also have some review questions. Okay? So let's do it together. A test that compares each person with a norm is called, okay, give me the answer in the chat box. Just testing lang. A test that compares each person with a norm is called, correct, no. Ayan, a norm reference test. Okay, when we say norm or norm reference test, it's a test that the interpretation relies on the performance of others who took the test, or what we call the representative sample. Right? Now, let's go to the next question. Jennifer took a test in a school that indicated that she was doing very well in reading, but was having trouble with assignments that involved writing papers. She probably took what kind of test? Is it A, criterion reference, B, norm reference, C, personality, or D, projective? We can rely on the options if we can find clues in the item itself, no? Dapat alam natin kung bakit ito yung tamang sagot based on the choices that we have. Ayan. O sige nga, can we hear from someone bakit yan ang ating napili kung okay lang? Sige, just how it's interesting how we process the review items kasi or the test items. Can we hear from Miss Jemima? Okay lang. Sige po.
Hi po. In this statement, we have a phrase, doing very well in reading. That could mean there is a standard which served as a reference and was having trouble with assignments that involve writing papers. There could be a measure used to imply that she was having trouble with assignments. So there is no, it's not mentioning about norm or comparison with other respondents. So hence, I would say the best answer would be criterion reference.
Correct. Also, there's no mention of personality or the test taken was not really projective. Thank you, Miss Jemima. That's why the best answer and the correct, of course, is letter A. All right, now let's move forward to the next. When administering a test, he or she must tell clients in advance how tests will be used and describe the limits of confidentiality. Is not ethically bound to tell clients where their loyalty lies, or C, must provide full disclosure to the institution that ordered the testing, or D, are bound to maintain test security even if it violates the person's right to know. What's the answer? Is it A, B, C, or D? Correct. Apo. Yeah, we have to tell clients in advance how tests will be used and describe the limits of confidentiality and perhaps how long will it take, no, for them to complete, especially if it's a test battery. Ayan. Of course, we are not going to provide full disclosure sa ating institution, ano, where we are going to buy the test. Although, when we're purchasing tests, especially if it's for the school or for employment, we give them the reason, like para sa ang purpose, bakit tayo bibili. Sometimes there are also screening done by test providers, no, before sila mag-release, para sure na talagang yung gagamit ay hindi naman gagamitin sa mabuti. Ayan. O kaya talagang galing siya sa isang school na reputable or galing sa isang company na registered talaga. Kasama yon. Ang iba, ang alam ko meron pang, di ba, nagre-require ng license. Yan. Kasi hindi naman pwedeng ipa-administer yun kung kani-kanino lang. Okay, now let's go to the number 4. The most controversial and misunderstood psychological tests are A. Group test, B. Achievement test, C. Objective personality test, or D. Projective test. The most controversial and misunderstood. Okay. Sige nga, Sir Dave, okay lang. Share naman konti.
Hello ma'am, good morning
Hello.
po. Apo, base lang po dun ma'am sa choices. Kasi po di po ba meron po tayong structured and unstructured na tests.
Yes.
And yung projective po, ano po siya, unstructured, tama po ba? And siguro, base lang po dun sa choices, parang wala po kasing ano dun eh. Kumbaga parang in contrast dun sa objective, parang subjective po siya. Parang depende lang po dun sa perspective nung counselor kung paano niya i-interpret yung sagot po nung client, for example. So parang feeling ko lang po yung projective. Yun ma'am. Thank you po.
At alam nyo, merong research, no, na yung mga first intuition natin na sagot, minsan hindi natin maintindihan bakit ito yung pinipili natin, pero malakas yung hunch natin na ito yung sagot. Ayan. So, merong research na nagsasabi na usually may ganun talagang phenomenon na kahit hindi natin siya maintindihan. Siguro na na-try nyo na rin with all the practice tests, no? Na biglang may sayang moments tayo na pinili ko na yun, binura ko pa. Ayun. So, minsan may mga ganun talaga. Kaya one advice is, kapag yun na yung pinili mo, kahit hindi mo pa masyadong ma-process, maintindihan bakit yun na rin. No, yun na rin ang piliin mo. Pero, maging handa kang baguhin yun kapag sure na sure ka kung bakit mali yun. Ayun. Kasi probably yung mga wirings ng brain natin, talagang na-process yun na ito yung sagot. Although hindi pa niya ma-put into language bakit yun. Ayan. Pero going back to our item, yes, projective personality tests are most controversial and misunderstood because in terms of its validity, compared to structured personality tests, mas mataas kasi yung validity coefficients ng mga yun, ng mga self-report and structured personality tests. Pag projective, medyo mababa. Ayan. But still, they are being used because it gives different insights sa mga clinicians, no, are counseling with people who have really diagnosis. Ayan. So, it's controversial, but it's still useful. Then the last review question, which of the following is an advantage in individually administered tests? A, they provide cost-effective approaches to testing. They are typically easy to administer. Their scoring is more reliable, and D, they allow individualized administration. Okay. Okay, we're also calling our support, tech support po, no? Mayroon pong mga, sabi ni Ma'am Eileen, paki-accept po ang iba. Sa ating pong tech support, ha, pakisuyo po. Answers po tayo. Which of the following is an advantage in individually administered tests? A, they provide cost-effective approaches to testing. B, they are typically easy to administer. C, their scoring is more reliable. Or D, they allow individualized administration. advantage. Okay, yes, correct mo, no, Sir Dave. It's really letter D. It couldn't be an advantage sa letter A because definitely individually administered tests are not cost effective. Mas mahal siya compared sa mga group test. Also, when it comes to time, mas hindi rin efficient for HR to provide individually administered test. Kasi one-on-one pa kayo, tapos kung pipila pa yung ibang mga applicants, diba? So it's totally not cost effective. They're also not easy to administer kasi you really have to stay focused sa iyong client and ikaw mismo yung mag-i-administer ng iba pang mga tests, performance test man yan, tapos kailangan mo siya i-observe. Their scoring is more reliable. Definitely not true because meron ding reliability yung mga group tests. Okay? Ayan. So now kindly get your pen and paper because we're going to have a short review, no, about the meaning and nature of psychological tests. All right? So I'll present to you some key concepts or some clues, and then you have to tell me anong concept po yun. Is it assessment, psychological assessment, testing, measurement, or evaluation? I'll read the item. Number 1, a variety of quantitative or qualitative procedures used to obtain information about student performance. 2, a measurement device or technique used to quantify behavior or aid in the understanding and prediction of behavior. Or 3, the gathering and integration of psychology-related data for the purpose of making a psychological evaluation accomplished through a variety of tests, clinical interview, and other psychological assessment tools. Ayan. So ano kaya yung number 1, number 2, and number 3? Of course, dun lang po tayo iikot sa testing. Yung mga basic concepts ng testing. Testing, assessment, evaluation, test, measurement, instrument. Yan. Ano po kayong mga words ito? Okay na po tayo? Wow, si Ma'am Roselia nag-offer na. Babay, pwede naman pala sa chat, no? Aside from pen and paper. Okay, sige. Okay, so let's see, no? A variety of quantitative or qualitative procedures used to obtain information about student performance. Tingnan nga natin. Ayan, correct, no? Assessment, test, and psychological assessment. So balikan lang natin ng konti. Assessment is a variety of quantitative and qualitative procedures. When we say procedures, ayan, proseso ito. And assessment is a process wherein we gather or we obtain information about a client, could be a student or could be our counselees. It could also be quantitative, meaning when we provide them with psychological tests that we score, so it's quantitative. It could also be qualitative when we give them, ano bang mga qualitative natin? Yung mga interviews, di ba? Ayan, routine interview, intake interview. Ayan, it's a form of assessment. Number 2, it's a test, no? It's a measurement device or the technique used to quantify behavior or aid in the understanding and prediction of behavior. We're talking about the item or the device that we use to measure. It could also be a technique. Wow, bakit akala ko parang pen and paper lang usually yung test, pero hindi po. Ang technique siya dahil it could also be performance-based, no, based on observation of the behavior of the subject or of our client. Ayan. So, It's also a technique. Number 3, it's psychological assessment because of the term psychological related data. And even if hindi pa sabihin na psychology related data yan, pero kung makikita mo rin yung mga terms such as personality, cognitive ability, ano pa ba? Interests, attitude, yan, socio-emotional status, mental health, ayan. So alam mo na leading ito for psychological assessment. Whereas kapag wala po yun, basta more on the procedure itself, it's just assessment. Alright? So next number, objective and standardized measure of a sample of behavior. Ano kaya yun? The objective and standardized measure of a sample behavior. Kindly, pwede naman i-chat na lang natin. Nakaka-enjoy. Ma'am Marcela, thank you for participating. Helping process which includes collecting diagnostic information, understanding this information, integrating it to make a judgment, and intervening to facilitate the solution. Ano kaya ang number 1 at ang number 2? Objective and standardized measure of a sample behavior. Helping process which includes collecting diagnostic information, understanding this information, integrating it to make a judgment. Oh, yung sabi natin kanina, kailan lang siya tatawaging psychological assessment. Ayan, integrating it to make a judgment and intervening to facilitate solution. Okay, number 1. Ayan, number 1, testing. Number 2 is assessment. So why? Ayan, so testing is an objective and standardized measure of a sample of behavior. Like, ito yung usually yung sinasabi ko din po, no, kapag may mga terms kasi, pag sabi nating objective and standardized, ibig sabihin meron talagang, kahit sabihin nating subjective yung type ng test, di ba? Kasi projective, ganyan. Meron pa ring sense of objectivity ron kasi na-validate pa rin yung test. Okay? Nag-undergo pa rin ito ng development and validation, pati yung reliability. So it could be regarded as a standardized measure. Ayan. So the technique when we measure the sample of behavior, it's testing. Okay? But when we talk about the device or the technique itself, it's the test. But the act of measuring or the act of measuring a sample of behavior, it's testing. Number 2, it is assessment. Kasi walang wala naman nakalagay na may psychology related data. Very general yung term. Ayan. So it's just assessment. However, syempre kapag sa multiple choice, lahat naman mga psychology, wala namang assessment lang. Psychological assessment, testing, measurement, evaluation. Ang sagot po ay assessment. Kasi ang focus ng number 2 ay the process wherein we collect, we understand, and integrate to make a judgment. Ayan. Medyo may thin line lang between assessment and evaluation kasi ang next step ng assessment ay evaluation. So when we assess, we really make use of the data. We obtain enough data, we integrate, we collect, and we integrate them. Okay? Ayan. So it's assessment. Pag evaluation, the focus naman is sa judgment. Okay, so ayan, meron tayong mga nakukuhang keyword or clues. Kapag sinabi nating assessment, ang focus ay integration, obtaining, and collection of data. Ayan, let's try the next. Ayan, its purpose of assessing diverse functions including cognitive abilities, aptitudes, personality characteristics, attitudes, values, interests, emotions, motivations, among others, in support of psychological counseling, psychotherapy, and other psychological interventions. Its purpose of assessing diverse functions of, ayan na, ang dami. So ano kaya yan? Then number 2, the process of obtaining a numerical description of the degree to which an individual possesses a characteristic. The process of obtaining a numerical description of the degree to which an individual possesses a characteristic. And then number 3, it's a conceptual problem-solving process of gathering dependable, relevant information about individual, group, or institution in order to make informed decision. Okay. Yeah, so may mga clues na tayo sa number 1, ha? Nga. Keep your guesses coming. Number 1 po, no? Its purpose of assessing diverse functions. Sige, number 1 muna. Purpose of assessing, ay, ayan na. Its purpose of assessing diverse functions, including cognitive abilities, attitudes, personality. Yan. Of course, it's number 1. It's psychological assessment. Thank you po for Ma'am Zoraida and Ma'am Roselia, no? Because we are assessing, so obviously assessment na to, pero dahil nakita natin na meron pang mga items related to, ayun na nga, psychological constructs, so it's really psychological assessment. For number 2, it's the process of obtaining a numerical description. Okay, the answer is actually measurement. Ano, correct, Ma'am Roselia? When we obtain a numerical description, we test when we are measuring. So medyo ano to, no, medyo confusing, pero it's testing when we are measuring the behavior. Or kapag, katulad ng ano po, no, kapag meron tayong tape measure, yun na lang siguro, para very relatable yung example. When we test or when we want to identify kumusta yung waistline natin, that's testing. No, we wrap around the tape measure sa ating bewang. Also, it's testing. Sige, patingin nga. Gano'n na ba yung size? Ayan, it's testing. Pero, the moment you get that numerical description, you get the measurement. Diba? Or you get the score. Same thing when we provide tests. Diba? Pag binibigay mo yung test niya, ito ay Culture Fair Intelligence Test. I'm measuring your behavior or your cognitive ability right now. Pero the moment you score and you get that numerical description, it's already measurement. Okay? Malinaw po tayo doon. And then number 3, wow, correct. It's really assessment. Bakit? Hindi siya psychological assessment kasi wala namang sinabi about psychological constructs. It's just gathering relevant information to make informed decision. So, correct? It's really assessment. And then let's try this set of definitions ulit, and then sino kaya yung mga yan? Ito na. Process an individual used to judge information from one or more sources. That process may focus on test data as well as observations and other sources. Now we can see the shift of focus from the data now to the judgment, diba? And then number 2, a systematic procedure for measuring a sample of behavior by posing questions in a uniform manner. Okay. So, yan, correct. The process an individual used to judge information, it's evaluation. Pag sinabi nating evaluation, ayun na, judgment, decision, diagnosis. It's evaluation. And then number 2, systematic procedure for measuring a sample of behavior. Parang napahapyawan na rin natin yun kanina. Correct na po. It is, yes, correct. It is testing. Ayan. Evaluation, ang focus judgment, decision, and testing is the act of measuring a certain behavior. Then let's go to the next item. Nalaglag to. Used to assign numericals to or numerals to objects or constructs according to rules so that numbers have quantitative meaning. Sige, number 1 muna. Used to assign numerals to objects or constructs according to rules so that numbers have quantitative meaning. Ayan. Miss Christine is the other, sabi pwede din naman yan, ano, scoring. Pero the other term for scoring is measurement. So kapag wala sa choices ang scoring, doon ka na sa measurement. Pero pag wala sa choices sa measurement pero may scoring. Ayan. Okay. Measurement or scoring. Number 2, an individual instrument where the focus is on evaluation. It's an individual instrument, the one we use, no, the device itself. Yes, it's a test. It's a test. Paano naman to? Number 3, checklist, skills, and inventories to provide information. Can we also say that it's a test? Sabagay, pwede din, ano? Ayan. But when we say checklists and inventories, checklist kasi hindi naman siya talaga test talaga na meron kang score. Ito yung high or low level. Yan. Pag checklist, ina-identify lang yan. Unlike sa mini problem checklist, no? Ano dito yung mga problem mo to determine ano yung areas na meron siyang conflict. Ayan. So, we collectively call them as, correct, no, Miss Lane, instrument. And again, the act of providing rules or the score itself, its measurement, the device we use to measure a sample of behavior, to make an evaluation, that is a test. The collective term we use for different types of tests or different ways to gather information is the instrument, checklists, scales, and inventories. Next number. Ayan. The process of making judgments about the quality of student performance using existing data or outcomes. Ayan na. The process of making judgment about the quality of student performance using existing data or outcomes. Correct po, no? It's evaluation. How about number 2? Procedures used to gather information about clients, which is then used to facilitate clinical decisions and provide information to clients. Procedures used to gather information about clients, which is then used to facilitate clinical decisions and provide information to clients. Ayan. Correct, no, Sir Ryan? It's... Bakit psych eval, Sir Ryan? Pwede namang evaluation lang. Pero what made you choose na it's a psych evaluation? Because of the clue, clinical decision. Ayan. Clinical decision. So, hindi neutral or hindi lang for general purpose. May ano talaga. Okay lang, sir. Chat-chat na lang. Ayan, clinical decision. Medyo confusing, ano? Kasi meron ding word na gather information. Ayan. So, parang kapag gather information, parang assessment, ano? Ayan. Pero meron din tayong term dito na, ayan, to facilitate clinical decisions and provide information to clients. So, yun, it's evaluation. Like, pag nalaman mo na ano ang diagnosis, i-relay mo na yan sa client mo. Ayan. So, it's the presentation of what was assessed. Ayan. Number 3, the systematic procedures for observing behavior and describing it with the aid of numerical scales or fixed categories. Systematic procedures for observing a behavior and describing it with the aid of numerical scales or fixed categories. We don't assign scores pa dyan, ha? Pag numerical scales, katulad ng Likert scale, yung sila mag-report sila na very true of me of ano to 4 or 3 to, diba? Sila, sinasagutan nila yung participants or yung client, sila yung nagsasagot. Ayan. Pero hindi mo pa tinototal yon. Ayan. Ang sagot po ay tama, no? It's evaluation, psychological evaluation, and testing. Ayan. Number 3 is testing. Okay. So those are some of the terms. Hopefully this activity help you identify, no? Ano po ba yung nauuna? Testing or measurement? Para lang po malinaw sa atin. Okay, correct. Testing. So after po ng testing, anong mangyayari? Okay, after ng measurement, anong sumunod? No, testing, kasi nga, ay, nagbigay tayo ng test battery, tapos may scores na sila. Okay? May na-miss tayo. Ayan, testing, measurement, assessment, and evaluation. Opo. Kasi especially when we want to arrive in a certain diagnosis or certain judgment, we want to collect as much as we can. For cognitive, personality, di ba? Gusto nating malaman yon, kumusta yung emotional stability niyan. Ayan. So, basically, marami kang itetest, marami kang i-scorean or measurement. Pagkatapos, i-collect mo yun lahat. It's assessment. You integrate it na, dito sa personality test, sa NEO-PI-R niya, ito yung result. Sa Culture Fair Intelligence Test, ito yung result. Nagbigay ako ng work value scale, ito rin yung result. So right now, ini-integrate ko na sila. And then, sa paggawa ng report, probably nandun na rin yung evaluation kung fit ba ang applicant to work or hindi. Ayan. So, assessment yon, the process when we integrate all of the data we got from the tests that the person take. Okay? Sige po. So, let's identify ano ba ang uses of tests. Total, nandun na rin naman tayo. Let's move forward with the uses of tests and sa iba't ibang settings. So, number 1, it could be clinical. So, when we say clinical, it's assessment of intelligence and pathology. And when we say pathology, kasama na rin po dito yung mga sa personality dimensions niya, kung kumusta, meron ba siyang emotional disturbance or behavioral disturbance. Ayan. Clinical. We also have counseling wherein it's used for assessment of career, interests, skills, and social adjustments. And the purpose is to help them, di ba? Especially if confused si grade 12, ano bang course ang i-take niya? Nag-HUMS siya. No, pero confused kung magsa-psych ba siya or magti-teaching. Yan. So perhaps assessment of career skills, mag-take muna siya ng RIASEC, ganyan, tapos identify ano bang nakuha niya, realistic or social, ano ba yung strength niya doon. Investigative. Ayan. Skills and social adjustment. When we say social adjustment, it could be kapag nag-transfer yung student, tapos medyo may difficulty sa pag-adjust sa panibagong from small school to big school, or from ano ba yung tawag, from senior high school to college, kasi nag-iba yung may mga transition. Yan, so we need counseling. For neuropsychology, the focus is to assess brain damage. Okay? Ayan. So ano ba yung mga test natin? We have the Houston Ritan na test, or Ma'am Zoraida, may mga test na binibili. Usually yung talagang ayun nga, katulad nung for brain damage, ayan, may mga price talaga sila. Although merong iba, for example, sa mga nada-download online, we just have to seek permission sa developer or sa yung company na nagpa-publish. Minsan kasi meron naman they allow basta non-commercial use. Yan. So usually naman kapag for educational purpose, for research, it's for free. Like yung VIA, I'm not sure if you have heard of the VIA, character strengths. It's free as long as you're going to use it for research. So pwede yun. Bawa, gusto mo malaman yung character strengths ng students natin, kung ano ba sila, mataas ba yung kanilang temperance, yung gratitude, yung forgiveness, ayan. Pwede yon, pero ibabalik mo yung report, i-report mo yung results sa kanila. Ang ginagamit nila kasi yun to further establish the validity and reliability of the scale. Kaya yun, minsan libre, pero yun, parang tulong mo na rin sa kanila yun para ma-establish lalo yung validity ng scale nila. Ayan. Ulit, so neuropsych, ano pa ba? Meron tayong Bender. Ayan, Bender visual motor. Ayan, ginagamit din po yan to test the brain or to assess if there's a brain damage. Ayan. For school, ayan, we have the assessment of ability and academic progress, maturity and readiness for school, and for handicapped children, kung kumusta ba yung kanyang disability, kaya ba niyang mag-mainstream, or talaga bang dapat ay for IEP lang siya, individualized lang yung kanyang education program, o baka pwede naman siya isali. Ayan. When we say assessment of ability and academic progress, kasama dito yung kanyang aptitude, diba? Kasama yung kanyang achievement. Tatandaan pa ba yung pagkakaiba ng achievement at saka ng aptitude? When we talk about aptitude, we talk about the letter P. What's the big P for aptitude? I-chat na lang pa. Correct! Ayan, with all caps pa, Miss Christine. Potential. Totoo naman. No, aptitude is for potential. How about for achievement? Okay lang. Ayan, for achievement, it is the total or the overall learning acquired through time. Okay, so that's medyo mahaba, achievement. Okay, for readiness for school din, kasama din yun, no? Kung fit na ba, kasi may ibang parents, hindi ko alam kung issue pa rin to ngayon, ano? Pero may ibang parents na gusto nang i-grade 1 kagad yung anak. Pero ang sabi naman ng DepEd, kaya may Kinder 1, Kinder 2 para ma-promote muna yung emotional readiness ng bata. Ayan. And that helps the school to identify kung para sa ang section ba tong batang to, especially kung may more than one section, kung sila ay naka-sectioning based sa cognitive ability. May mga ganun kasi, pero may iba naman, they prefer heterogeneous grouping. Ayan. Next is for industrial and organization. So it's assessment of managerial potential, the training needs, the cognitive and psychomotor abilities. So it can be used for selection, for recruitment, diba, to identify who's fit to work and who's fit to be promoted. Ayan. Also, training needs. Halimbawa, nakita na yung motivation ng employees parang bumababa, o yung efficiency nila, ano ba yung mga dapat i-provide sa kanilang next team building activity. Ano ba yung dapat na maging focus? Diba? Is it teamwork? Is it interpersonal trust? Ayan. Ayan. Cognitive and motor ability, psychomotor, ayan. Kaya ba niyang i-perform talaga yung mga tasks based doon sa job description? Okay. So, those are some uses of tests, but of course, we usually saan tayo nakafocus ay tayo as counselors, dito tayo sa counseling and sa school. Pero if you're leaning to counseling and clinical, ayan. Ito naman ang mga combination. Ayan. For guidance, we have here 4 primary uses of assessment. Number 1, noteworthy po no, I'll upload the test, the review materials as soon as we end this session. So testing is used as an aid to focus on developmental issues. So when we say developmental issues, it could be based on the transition, the emotional stability ng bata na hindi pa nag-school or ng kindergarten, no? Tapos bigla siyang pinasok sa school. Meron tayong children's anxiety test na tinatawag, kumusta siya, nakakapag-adjust ba, or confident naman siya sa school. Yan. To focus on developmental issues. Pati yung sa self-concept, yan, yung mga adolescent natin, di ba, nag-change yung kanilang self-concept, or they tend to question, sabi ni Erickson. So we have, for example, the ano ba yung mga self-concept na alam natin? So, si Pasaw, you can just jot this, no? Si Pasaw, Emir na Pasaw, meron siyang self-concept scale for the adolescents. Self-concept, dapat scale, self-concept lang po. Ayan, meron tayo yung Vinland, na test din for kumusta nakakapag-adjust ba siya, yung bata. Ayan. Ayan. Testing as an aid in decision making. Of course, kung ang batang ito ba ay dapat papasukin or dapat ba mag-seek muna siya ng mental health support or clearance. I'm not sure kung kumusta yung practice niyo sa ibang sa schools that you are in right now or kung saan man po tayo. Pero may mga schools kasi that they won't allow the student, especially kapag nalaman na parang may may psychological disturbance, possibly may depression. Yun. So kailangan muna magbigay ng clearance na fit to study. Ayan. So kasama rin dun yung testing, binibigyan siya ba NEOPI to assess kung pwede ba itong mag-continue or baka kailangan muna niya mag-consult ng psychologists before siya bumalik sa schooling. Ayan. So it's used for decision making. It's also used for problem solving. Ma'am, anong course ko? Hindi ko alam. So, yun. Problem solving. Career. You have the RIASEC. We have the ONET. Ayan. Testing used in a psychoeducational manner to identify ano ba yung mga modules or intervention programs na pwedeng ibigay. Pag sinabi natin kasing psychoeducational, pag sa group process, di ba? It has something to do with preventive programs to help children avoid or adolescents or ano pa, yung mga group natin para ma-avoid nila kung ano man yung possible issues that they'll experience at school. Ayan. So kapag mabababa yung self-concept, baka kailangan sila yung bigyan ng program for confidence. And it's also helping them to have their personal growth and to also stimulate insight, understanding, and action. Meaning to say, mas ma-realize nila na ito yung dapat kong i-change pa, dapat kong i-improve sa sarili ko. So, yan. Psychoeducational. Right? So, for classroom, naman, we have testing programs and siguro you also have testing programs in your school and we don't just settle with personality tests, di ba? We also provide cognitive tests. So for classroom, we have, we can group pupils for instruction. Sino dito yung magkakasama o sino dito yung mas kailangan ng remediation? Kasi meron kasi yung mga lalo sa mga bata, may mabibilis makagets, tapos may iba na talaga naglalag behind. So, it will help the teacher, si counselor, mas ma-identify niya yung mga students na kailangan talaga ng focus, kailangan ng help. Yan. So it will guide also the planning of activities for specific individual students. Kasi kung may handicap or merong student with disability, Ayan. It can also identify students' special diagnostic and diagnostic needs. Tapos ano yung mga remediation needs nila. Ano ba yung ito yung students na to, ano yung mga strength niya, ano good sila sa math pero sa language medyo mahirap. So it will help the teacher also develop ano yung good teaching strategy or saan siya magfo-focus na content. Ayan, for guidance, ayan, syempre, it will help guidance counselors to whenever they need to explain something to the parents, 'di ba? Bawa, especially yung nabanggit natin kanina, no, testing is used as decision making. Minsan may mga parent na hindi ganun ka-open sa pagbibigay sa papa-admit sa anak nila, no, sa psychologist, psychiatrist. Ayan, feeling kasi nila ay parang nag-iinapte lang. Minsan po no, may mga ganoon. Pero halimbawa, kapag nag-take ng test tapos talagang lumabas na ito yung anxiety ng anak mo, ayan, sometimes it helps the parents see that there is a need for mental health support, for professional support. Ayan. It also helps the counselor to build self-awareness among the students that they are serving. Ano ba yung self-picture na meron yung bata? Ano ba yung self-concept niya? Kamusta? How aware is the child about his potentials, strengths, or sa mga dapat niyang i-develop pa? Ayan. It will also help the students, say for example, sa career, to come up with choices kung saan siya mas magpipit, to help him set educational and vocational goals, career goals, di ba? And then, mas maiintindihan, especially kapag mayroong mga bata na biglang laging nawawala sa class o kaya palaging tardy, anong problema? Ayan. So, minsan mayroong mga teacher, counselor, conversation or consultation sessions. Ayan. So, pwedeng i-relay ni counselor, ito kasi yung condition ng bata. Then it will also serve as basis for recommendation. Meron bang mga students na nagpapapirma sa inyo ng recommendation form? O pwede niyong balikan yung mga test data. Kasi may mga question minsan sa recommendation, especially for senior high schools going to college, kailangan ng mga kasama sa requirements eh. Tapos ang sabi ay ipasagot sa advisor or sa guidance counselors. Minsan ikaw ang close ng bata, miss, pasagot naman. Ayan, tapos di mo alam kung anong ilalagay mo doon. Ayan, so mas magiging objective tayo kung meron tayong test data. And of course, it provides data enough for us to do research. Kasama pa rin talaga, no, kahit ang dami nating ginagawa, pero kasama to sa services ng isang Office of Student Services, and Student Affairs and Student Services, kailangan talaga merong research. Yan. So, kumusta yung mga bata nila, mga students natin? Ito ba ay, kumusta yung mental health nila? Yan. Baka kailangan talaga nila ng wellness break. Baka mataas na yung anxiety. Baka merong tendency sila na magkaroon ng depression. Baka ito yung set ng students na kailangan bigyan ng attention pa. O ito naman yung mga students na mataas ang resilience. So for research purposes, pwede rin na from first year nila, di ba? First year may ibibigay tayong test, and then fourth year will provide that test again, and then let's try to assess kumusta, paano na-improve ng student na yon yung kanyang character strength, for example, across time. Nung pumasok siya sa school na to, paano nag-improve? Yan. For administration, we also have forming and organizing of classroom groups. Yan, para malaman natin, ilang section ba? Sino ba yung pagsasamahin? Placing new students. Yan, we can also determine sino ba dito yung mga may special cases. And for the administration to, and evaluate the curriculum. Yan. So based sa test, ito yung lumabas. Okay, so baka dapat natin i-improve pa yung curriculum. Baka meron tayong mga curricular activities na pwedeng i-add para mag-improve yung social skills ng mga bata. Ayan. Help determine which students can be, ang tawag dito, yung ma-accelerate. Ayan. So pwede rin yun. And it can also be used to evaluate teachers. Halimbawa, nagbigay ka ng achievement test. Tapos, for their 1-year stay, kung ano yung sisagot niya nung una, kunyari nasa 80th percentile siya, pagkatapos ng buong school year, nasa 80th percentile pa rin siya, ay kamusta ang teachers? Talaga ba naging effective sila? Ayun. It could also be used for that purpose to evaluate the school as a unit itself. Yun nga, kumusta yung pagbibigay ng services natin? Na-improve ba talaga ang character, ang personality, ang socio-emotional dimension ng mga bata? Yan. Because of the services that you provide, student support, academic support. Yan. It can also provide enough data for research, syempre, and to provide information sa outside agencies. Say, for example, sa accreditation. Diba? Kailangan natin ng mga evidence. Meron ba dito nag-work sa State University? Diba? So yun lagi yung hinahanap ng mga documentary evidences. Ayan. Sige. Ito po. Ma'am Zoraida, pwede po yan. Alright. Actually, marami pa. Merong yung downloadable on net po, tsaka RIASEC. Online, libre lang. Okay. We also have general categories of tests. So number 1 is the test of performance. The examinee performs some specific tasks such as essay writing, answering multiple choice items, or mentally rotating images presented on a paper or screen. Sa test performance. Pag sinabi nating performance, talagang ina-assess kumusta yung cognitive ability niya. Even kahit yung eye and hand coordination, kung ano yung nakikita mo na itsura ng figure, kaya mo bang i-drawing as is? Or kaya mo bang through the blocks, kaya mo bang i-arrange based dun sa picture na pinigay sa'yo? Okay, gaano kabilis, gaano katagal mo siya nagawa? That's a test of performance. We also have behavior observations, tests that involve observations of the examinee's behavior within a particular context. Sometimes when the subject or the client is very young, hindi naman yan pwede magsagot ng self-report na I am often disturbed. I am easily distracted. Hindi naman siya pwede mag-rate ng self niya kung especially if it's too young. So what experts do is they do behavior observation. So merong 3 psychologists or experts, pwedeng mas marami, ganyan. Tapos meron silang checklist, behavior checklist na sinasagutan. Minamanifest ba nito yung ng batang ito ang gantong mga behavior? And then we can assess if that person or if that child meron ba siyang ADHD, or ano pa yung baka may Asperger's pala, diba? So behavior observation, especially kapag very young and they can't answer self-report questions. We also have, of course, self-reports. So examinees describe their feelings, attitudes, beliefs, and interests. So kasama dito yung mga Likert scale. And it's easy, even the DSEC po, it's easy for them to gauge yung mga may questions na you have to rate how true or how likely are you to manifest this behavior? Self-report. So usually mga po ito, mga I statement na I am usually blank. I feel blank. Yan. Then they just have to gauge how true it is or how much it does not apply to them. Okay. So test of performance, behavior observations, and self-reports. Now we move on to the types of tests. So when we have standardized and non-standardized tests. So when we say standardized, it is a test with prescribed direction for administration, for scoring, and interpretation. So kasama po doon lahat ng mga psychological tests na established, yung mga nabibili usually po, Ayan, standardized po ito. Kasi dumaan ito sa rigorous process. During development and validation, talagang madami po silang ginawang means to ensure that the test is really valid. Ayan. So, kasama doon yung mga pilot testing to determine gaano ba katagal talaga dapat i-take yung test. Bawa kapag grade 3 siya o kapag grade 5 siya, gaano dapat kabilis, ano yung average time. Yan. For scoring, is it the appropriate way to score? Ayan. And interpretation. Pag sabi nating standardized, may prescribed. It has to happen when you administer in Luzon, Visayas, or Mindanao, or in the other parts of the world. Isa lang yung paraan ng pag-administer. Yan. Siguro naman nakakita na tayo ng mga manual po, di ba? Sa mga manual talagang may example doon na ano pa yung verbatim na sasabihin mo. Okay? Today you are going to take a test on blah, blah, blah. Kompleto yon, script, babasahin mo na lang. So kung ano yung sasabihin ng test administrator dito, ganun din sa ibang bansa. It's prescribed saan ka man. Whereas the non-standardized test, usually teacher-made tests po, no? These are tests either for formative or summative evaluation of student performance. So let's just differentiate when we say formative. Ito yung mga hindi nire-record dapat ni teacher. hindi yung pag tinanong, teacher, is this graded? Hindi siya graded kasi when we say formative, it will just help you assess ano ba yung dapat pang matutunan, ano pa yung dapat mong ituro. Pero pag summative, ito na yon. Quizzes. Ano pa ba? Midterm exam. Yan. Achievement test nila, no? Yung 6-month period, kumusta yung learning nila. It's the summative evaluation. After the lesson, formative is given prior to the lesson. Yan. Okay? We also have the norm reference and criterion reference test. Although napahapyawan na natin yan kanina sa example po natin sa taas, no, ng mga review questions. But norm reference test, yan, the score interpretation is based on the performance of a particular group. Okay. There is always a representative sample. Yan. It also calls for relative interpretation of test based on the test taker's position with respect to the normative group. So tatandaan po natin, ang norm reference test ay merong relative interpretation. Hindi siya absolute. Yan. It's just relative because naka-base ka talaga sa performance ng iba. Yan. Whereas for criterion reference test, these are measures whose criteria for passing or failing have been decided beforehand. Ang classic example dito ay ang ating board exam. Di po ba? Okay, sa ating board exam ay at least 75 yung cut-off. Yan. So kapag above 75, nandun tayo sa 75 and above, yes, pasado tayo. Pero pag below 75, hindi tayo kasama. Yeah, so it's criterion reference. It's also already decided beforehand, yung cut-off score. Regardless kung ano pa ang maging performance ng mga board examinees during that time. Okay? And then, one meaning of the term criterion reference test is that it relates to referring an individual performance to some criterion that is defined performance level. Ayan. So, merong naka-determine. Parang teacher-made test din na ano ba, no grade below sa 10 item. O dapat at least maka 8 siya para pasado. Kasi pag 7, 70 na. Hindi na pasado yun. So, yan. May criterion. Yan. We also have individual and group tests and inventory. So when we say individual, these are test instruments that can be administered individually. So yun nga sabi natin, hindi sila cost-effective. Definitely pagdating sa time kasi paano na lang kapag recruitment ka, no? Tapos individual, mayroon kang 5 applicant na naghihintay sa'yo. Oras ka na matatapos. So it's not cost-efficient. Usually, we provide group test kahit po sa guidance. It can be easily administered. Paper and pencil lang. Basta magkakasama sila. Ayan. Sa time, kuha mo na agad. It's still valid and it's still reliable. However, kapag gusto mo talaga ng in-depth, usually po ang individual test ay binibigay sa clinical setting. Bawa, gusto mo talagang ma-identify kung ang batang to ay may giftedness. Yan. Baka yun na yung time na bibigyan siya ng individual test. Kasi nag-perform siya beyond ba sa group test, lumabas na talagang 99th percentile siya. Mataas naman, totoo ba to? So you verify it with individual test. Okay. For objective and subjective tests, of course, objective tests are measures that do not involve any personal sharing. These usually are used to measure achievement like multiple choice test, true or false test. So yan, pag objective test, these are tests with right or wrong answer. Yun, may specific lang na answer. Excuse me po. Kailangan mag-water break. Ayan. So, objective test po, meron lang isang tamang sagot. Ayan. Tapos, the rest ay distractor na. Subjective tests are those that involve measuring personality, attitude, and so forth. Meron namang multiple choice sa sa 16PF, di ba? Merong choices. Pero, merong I prefer to sleep or eat. May mga ganon, di ba? Parang siya multiple choice. Pero, it's different. Kasi ang objective type po, isa lang talaga yung sagot, tapos the rest, distractor na. Pero pag subjective test yan, na may, yun nga, multiple choice personality, kahit anong piliin nila doon, yan, meron siyang kakalabasang result. Ito ba ang personality niya leading to agreeableness, leading to extroversion, or ano man yun. Yan, so bawat item, bawat choice is important. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hello po sa mga assistant po natin. Sila RA, R4A, R6. Pakisuyo naman po sa pag-a-admit. Salamat po. Ayan. Okay. Next, we go to the speed and power test. Speed tests are administered under a prescribed time limit, usually short and enough for one to finish answering the test. Yan, speed test, prescribed time limit. Kaya nga, speed. Actually, hindi mo matatapos yung isang buong... Na-try nyo na po ba yun? No? Yung parang ang bilis ng test, hindi ko pa natatapos. Pero ang ginigauge po dito kasi is gaano tayo kabilis mag-process ng information. Pero pag power test naman, is also cognitive type of test that has enough time limit for us to finish the entire test. And then, ang tinitingnan dito yung accuracy naman ng pagsagot, pag-process natin ng mga items. We also have verbal and non-verbal tests. Verbal tests, of course, merong words, may language, pero non-verbal test, wala. Pag sinabi nating non-verbal, it could be drawings or patterns, mga abstract reasoning po, no? And the beauty with non-verbal tests is that it is culture fair. Okay? Medyo unfair kasi kapag hindi mo first language ang English, tapos yung mga SRA, di ba, na verbal, merong mga dollar, yung hindi sa atin peso. So, iba yung culture nila. Ay, may mga word na snow, wala tayong snow. So, hindi siya culture fair. Lalo na kapag even those who did not really have formal education, so they can still answer non-verbal tests by recognizing what patterns should come next. And we can already gauge kung meron bang critical thinking ang batang ito or yung applicant. Yan, kahit hindi siya nakatapos talaga, no? Yan. We also have cognitive and affective tests. Pag sinabi natin cognitive tests, of course, those are tests that measures thinking skills or intelligence. And affective tests, those that are focusing on personality, interest, and values. Okay, so affective test, usually ito po yung mga binibigay din talaga natin sa psych, no? Siguro kung nung kayo ay nag-thesis, wala naman siguro nag-develop and nag-validate ng cognitive test, pero most likely meron for affective domain. Ayan. Okay. Gusto ko lang po i-highlight na yun nga, ang speed and power test at verbal and non-verbal test, usually sila po ay mga cognitive tests. Pero anything that any test that involve word, ito po ay verbal. Okay? Ang mga personality test could also be verbal. Achievement and aptitude test, alam na natin yan. Sige na tayo Okay, we have structured and projective personality test. Personality tests that measure typical behavior, traits, temperaments, and dispositions. Again, pag personality, traits, temperaments, and dispositions. For some references, they also consider personality as affective tests. Ayan. Structured objective tests provide a self-report statement to which a person responds to. True or false, yes or no, or rating scales. Projective tests naman provide an ambiguous test stimulus. Response requirements are unclear. So it could be spontaneous kasi based on the person. Say for example, the Rorschach, meron lang cards na ipapakita and then you have to the client should tell something whatever that comes na on their mind. Diba? TAT, we have the thematic apperception test. Merong mga pictures, tapos gagawin mo ng story. The response requirements or the response is really unexpected. It could be based on the experience or the orientation of the client. Ayan. The structured and projective. We also have other non-standardized assessment. Hindi lang pala teacher-made test ang non-standardized, no? It could also be, basta po, ito na lang ang key. Basta kapag ang test ay hindi dumaan sa rigorous validation and standardization process. Pag sabi ko sa ating standardization, wala siyang prescribed direction. Walang prescribed administration and scoring. Nagbabago-bago. Okay? O kaya naman, yun nga, sa pagkakadevelop, hindi naman na-check yung validity niya. Okay? Hindi rin na-check kung consistent measure ba ito. Ayan. So it could be categorized as non-standardized. Okay? So ito po yung mga possible din na non-standardized assessment. Observation, we have behavioral observation, anecdotal records, naturalistic or systematic role play tests. Also have interviews, structured interview, semi-structured interview, unstructured interview. Alam natin kapag structured ay talagang very fixed, pati yung follow-up question itemized. Pero sa semi-structured ay merong mga set ng questions tapos you're free to have follow-up question if you feel like may kulang pa sa in-explain ng client. Unstructured ay basta may pag-uusapan lang kayo na topic and then whatever happens would happen there. Okay, mga kumustahan na unstructured lang. Yan. For sure, meron po sa atin na nag-conduct din ng mga kumustahan, di ba? Tapos may mga interview questions para pang group interview. Ayan. We also have checklist. Ayan. Standardized and informal checklist. Ayan. So, paano ba? Ang standardized test po kasi could also be, pero non-standardized pero standardized. Ayan. Pero it could vary po kasi yung sa MUNI, although it's also valid pala, no? Pero, sige. Ano ba? Mga standardized checklist could also be regarded as non-standardized. Depende po na kapag na-change na lang yung directions. Yun. Hindi siya sumunod sa prescribed administration. It could be non-standardized. Rating skills, yan, numerical and qualitative. Kapag numerical, alam natin yung pag numerical, yung i-gauge nila from 1 to 10, gaano ba ito ka, how acceptable it is for you, rated from 1 to 10. Pero pag qualitative, sila po yung mga meron talagang qualitative, katulad sa Likert scale na merong irrelevant, relevant, more relevant. Yung mga ganoon, i-gauge nila. Qualitative rating scale. The structured interview use checklist and rating scales po. Pwede na, during the whole interview session, pwede pong gumamit. Pero ang structured interview ay mga interview questions po talaga. Pwede naman po yun magkaroon ng combination, kaya nga siya non-standardized kasi depende sa need. O bakit sinasama pa rin natin to? Akala ko ba ang psychological testing, di ba? Dapat standardized. Pero these are sources of information po kasi. Ayan. Halimbawa, anecdotal records. Pwede itong i-review ng, kunyari ako ay counselor ni Jaja, nung grade 1 siya hanggang grade 3. Tapos umalis na ako ng school. Meron na nung grade 4 siya, iba na yung counselor niya. So, yung anecdotal records na naiwan doon, pwedeng i-check ng new counselor. No? Ayan. To assess, ito pala, to gather enough data about the client. Ito pala siya. Ito pala si Jaja. Anecdotal records. Okay? So, pwede pong talagang mag-mix and match tayo ng iba't ibang mga assessment dito kasi nga, non-standardized naman siya. As long as it will help you gather information about the client. Depende po sa need. Ayan. Now, we also have other assessment tools. Ayan. Peer appraisal, di ba? Yung sociometry, kapag inaalam natin kumusta or how other sociometry, how their peers or how their classmates view this student, yan, peer appraisal. Okay. Oops. Ay, medyo, bakit ano nangyari dito? Sige po. Try po natin tong item na ito, no? Medyo linawan lang natin. And Miguel is reviewing for the upcoming RGC exam. He recites the following lines. Psychological assessment only use standardized tests. Personality tests are subjective tests. 3. The tests with cutoff scores are criterion reference tests. And 4. Behavior observations are solely used for children. Which of the following statement is true? Is it A? Oh, sige. Is it A, 1 and 2? Is it B, 3 only? Is it C, all of the above? Or D, 1 and 3 only? At ang sagot ay, okay, B. Tingnan nga natin. Ayan. Tama po. Letter B. Sorry sa slide ha. Iba yung iba yung format. Nag-open kasi ako gamit yung ibang version ng Microsoft. Okay. Ibang Microsoft PowerPoint. Nag-iba yung format ko. Ayan. So we have next ay procedures in test administration. Medyo po ito, light pa to, no? Pero usually po ay nagkakaroon kasi ng mga situational questions sa board exam. Tapos sabihin which one is appropriate during pre-testing. Tapos may iba mahahalo na items pang na pala during testing. Ayan. Sige. Okay. So let's start. For pre-testing, we have to remind the client of the testing time. Pwede yung kasama yung pagte-text or pag-i-email na this is to remind you or this is to confirm your attendance and your schedule sa ganitong ganyan. Ayan. Then get informed consent if needed. Prepare the test materials. Kailangan ba natin ng pen? Kailangan ba ng scratch paper? Kung mayroong mathematical, po yan, mga mag-solve sila, may formula. Next, arrange for the distribution of the test. Secure the date and schedule of the test for ample time and conflict. Arrange for the distribution. Decide on the order of the test. Arrange for the collection of test materials. So, kasama pa yun, yung pass it to the center aisle, then forward. Kailangan alam mo yung mga instruction kasi pag sabi mo, pass the test. Lalo na kapag mga bata, bibit-bitin nila lahat ng test, itatakbo nila, ang gulo na. Ayan. So, dapat complete, alam natin kung paano mo ipapasubmit para may order pa rin. Ayan, alam mo rin kung ano yung pagkakasunod-sunod para hindi maghalo. Usually po, ang prescribed arrangement ng test battery ay nauuna ang cognitive tests bago ang personality test. Okay. Ayan. So next ay test knowledge. Familiarize yourself with the manual and the booklet. Again, because the manual will tell you exactly how you should administer the test. Paano yung words na dapat mong sabihin para clear yung instruction. Then, know the contents of the test, especially if there are, pag di mo nabasa yung item, pagkatapos may student magtatanong, ano po itong ang word na ito? Thus, hindi mo rin ma-explain. Dahil lagot. Or hindi mo rin alam. Yan. And then, practice test administration direction. Check for time limits. So, kumusta? May timer din ba tayong dala? Na-ready ba? Cellphone, pwede rin naman. Pero yun nga, we have to observe din company policies or school policies. Kung meron namang provided talagang timer, di yun yung gamitin natin. Pero ang cellphone kasi, di ba, usually binaban natin sa students na wag mag-cellphone during testing tapos ikaw may cellphone. So baka hindi siya maganda. Okay. And then familiarize yourself with response directions, take the test, practice scoring, and then anticipate questions the test takers might ask. Yan. So, kasama po yun, take the test. So, it will help you familiarize paano ba sagutan yung test or anong mga item yung pwedeng matagalan yung mga client natin. Okay. For management, we have, of course, to schedule the venue, check the seating arrangement, kumusta, one seat apart ba, comfortable ba yung paggalaw ng mga siko o baka nagbabanggaan. Ayan, check the lighting conditions and ventilations because pag masyadong madilim or dim yung light, baka antukin yung client o kaya baka hindi mabasa ng maayos. And hindi siya nasa optimum level of performance. Natin ma-accurately measure ang mga gusto nating ma-measure. Even the ventilation, kumusta pag nilalamig yung yung client or sobrang init na init. Natandaan ko yung, hindi ko alam sa inyo kung ba nakwento yun, pero may time na may board exam sila tapos sobrang lakas ng aircon, nakatapat sa kanila, hindi sila makapagsagot na maayos. Ayun. Kaya magdala rin kayo ng jacket in case na biglang may ganun palang scenario. Okay. Keep the testing area clean, arrange the materials needed, take note of the questions in the manual, make a list of things to accomplish. So yun, para at the end of, umalis na yung mga test takers, ma-check mo, kumpleto ba, nagawa ko ba lahat. Ayan. Information for examinees. Of course, we have to provide test guides to the examinees, state the purpose of the test, kasama to sa informed consent, no? Indicate the testing condition and the situation, inform client of the testing cost, especially kung sa clinical setting tayo, hindi yung school lang nagsho-shoulder ng test, kundi yung client mismo. Yan, inform client of the other materials needed for the test. Baka kailangan ba niya bring your own pen kasi pandemic, hindi tayo bibigay ng pen. Explain the use of the results and discuss how the test will be scored. Okay. So, ito po yung mga information na pwede nating sabihin sa client. Ayan. So, during testing, ito naman yung kailangan nating tandaan. So, we have to distribute the materials according to plan based sa paano ba yung pag-submit. So, baka ibibigay mo lang sa aisle and then sabihin mo sa aisle ay pass it backwards. Yan. Then remind test takers not to begin until instructed to do so or have test takers check their materials. Make sure that all necessary identifying data have been filled up on both booklet and answer sheets. Then read the directions from the manual. Give test takers time to ask questions. Display the starting and finish time. So pwede naka-project po yun. Mas okay kasi yon yung nakikita nila kung gaano karami para sila rin mismo kung wala silang orasan, mag-gauge na how much time. Kesa yung bigla kang papasok na 10 minutes na lang, 5 minutes na lang, so hindi nila nag-gauge ng maayos. So it's better if they have, if you have their clock, available clock. And then, move around to check to make sure that the test takers are answering correctly, turning pages properly, and stopping as directed. Minsan po, di ba may mga test na gano'n, stop muna, tapos wait for the next instruction. Meron din mga tests na, minsan nangyayari to sa atin, yung nasa number 46 ka na, nakatingin ka sa number 46, pero ang sinishade mo, nandun sa number 36. 'Di ba? Ako lagot, ang hirap pag mag-erase ka ulit. Yan. So, role po yun ng test administrator to monitor kung kumusta yung mga estudyante. Ayan, especially kung students to. Para mag-guide. Ayan. Next ay, replace broken pencils. Encourage test takers to check their answers before submitting. Observe test behavior and note irregularities. Kasama yon. Ang testing talaga, hindi yan nagtatapos sa pagbibigay ng instructions and then bahala na sila, no? Kailangan talaga you have to stay and observe them. Kumusta yung, baka mamaya merong isa nakaganon na lang. Baka hindi na siya okay. Ayan. O baka naman may galaw ng galaw. May kumikembot sa upuan. Yun. Baka may sinisilip siya sa ilalim. Hindi natin alam kung anong sinisilip niya. And then observe, guard against cheating and other conditions that would invalidate the test results. Ayun. Ima-mark po yun. Naalala ko merong time na nag-administer kami ng, anong tawag dito? Ng entrance exam. Yon, entrance exam. Tapos, merong dalawa na makulit. Iba yung behavior. So, minark namin siya. Na ito yung, during this time, ito yung behavior niya. Tapos, nung interview, so, nagdagdag pa tayo ng mga interview questions to screen the student. Okay. Test selection and evaluation, especially if you're going to choose which appropriate test should be included in your guidance testing program. So we have test purpose. Kumusta yung test purpose? Does it correspond with your counseling needs? Kumusta yun? Magagamit ba natin yun? Or baka mamaya ang ganda lang ng test pero limited lang yung pang ano lang pala siya, pang first year lang pala siya. O hindi siya pwedeng i-administer na kapag fourth year. So hindi siya ganun ka cost efficient pagdating sa counseling needs natin. Yan. Sige nga, ano bang mga tests yung naiisip ninyo na fit for counseling? So number 1, yung career, syempre, ano pa? Do you think MMPI is for counseling, school counseling? Minnesota multiphasic, pwede ba yon? O kaya, boss, bili tayo ng ng Rorschach kasi maganda yun, makakatulong sa atin malaman kung meron silang mga emotional disturbance. O, depende, no? Kung clinical setting yun, baka pwede, no? Counselor ka sa isang clinical setting. Pero kung counselor ka sa isang school tapos may Rorschach kayo, wow. Yan. So you have to check, does it really correspond with your counseling needs? Next is test development. Was care taken in constructing items? So yun, especially tayo gusto natin makatipid, di ba? So baka titingnan lang tayo online ng mga available test, pwedeng downloadable na PDF, pero baka mamaya hindi naman reputable or baka hindi naman din careful yung pagkakagawa ng items. May maraming ganun po, di ba, sa Facebook, yung mga subukin ang iyong may mga ganun. So we can't say that care was taken while constructing those test items. Don't even know sino yung gumawa, but it's just for fun. Ayan. Next is appropriate selection of norming or group criterion. Does the norming group seem appropriate? Does the size of the norm appear sufficient? Is the criterion clearly stated and selected? Ayan. So, appropriate ba? Baka mamaya ikaw ay gagamit ka ng self-concept scale, pero during norming, hindi pala for adolescent yon, for college students pala. O baka hindi yun yung scale na dapat mong bilhin. Ayan, reliability. Does the instrument appear to have adequate reliability? Are there SEMs provided? When we say SEMs, that is the standard error for measurement. And it's important for test developers or for us counselors to check meron bang SEM yung test. Kasi pag binost niya na wala yung SEM, ay hindi yan valid and reliable. Pag sinabi nating standard error for measurement, ito po yung, kasi nga alam natin na standard error. Yan. Alam natin na kapag psychological test, hindi po yan magbibigay ng absolute score talaga. 100 ang iyong IQ. Yan. Yung 100 na yun, pag the next time na magte-take ka ng test, pwedeng mag 101, mag 102, pwedeng mag 99, di ba? So paiba-iba. Kaya kailangan i-provide yung SEM. Pwede kasing ang SEM niya ay +1, plus or minus 2, plus or minus 3. Ayan. So, ibig sabihin, possible na maglalaro doon yung sagot mo, pero consistent pa rin yun. Ayan. Pwede ka maging 90, 90, 93, pwede ka maging 97, 98, 99. Ayan. Basta depende sa report ng SEM. Pero kapag nag-take ka ng 100 ang IQ mo, tapos biglang naging 120 the next time around, tapos walang SEM provided, alam mong may something wrong doon sa test na yun. Okay? So, yun po yung standard error for measurement. It provides an allowance. Yung range na pwedeng maglaro doon yung mga score mo, pero reliable pa rin from that range. Okay? Sige, next naman ay validity. Does the manual provide validity information? So, ano bang mga validity natin? Construct, diba? Criterion, content validity. Yan. Bias. Did they evaluate the items for possible bias? So, kasama dito yung pilot testing. Kumusta? Ang test na ito ay na-administer ba sa ang sample? Baka puro Western lang. O baka may Asian sample din naman. Masabi mo bang appropriate na ito for the Filipino adolescents kung sila yung bibigyan natin ng test? Ayan. Scoring materials. Are there resources to help me adequately interpret the results? Are there materials to help the client understand the result? So, minsan baka may 16 PF ka, pero wala kang template. Meron po ba may nakapag-administer na po ba ng 16 PF dito? Di ba meron siya answer sheet? Tapos ang daming template na ipapatong-patong mo yung yung mga template doon. Tapos kung ano lang yung may butas, yun lang yung i-scorean mo. Meron po bang naka-experience na dito mag-administer ng 16 PF? Yun. So kung wala kang template, ang hirap ma-identify. Ay, thank you po Miss Pinky. Miss Pinky, may template din kayo. Okay lang ba magkwento ka ng konti? Paano yung buong process?
Hello po.
Ayun, sige.
Apo. Yes ma'am, meron po kaming template naman po ma'am. Parang isang buong standardized test po yun. Tapos, original din po yung mga booklet. Marami po yung booklet po, di ba? Kasi pwede po siyang group testing yung 16 PF. Tapos afterwards po yung pinaka answer sheet po nila, ayun po, pag mag-score po kayo using the template kung saan tatapat yung butas doon sa na shade nila, yun yung score niya. Parang per letter may equivalent score. Tas to total mo and all para makita po yung 16 PF nga po ng student. Yun po.
Ayan. Thank you po, ma'am, for for telling us at least brief backgrounder. Ganun kasi yun. Paano pag wala yung template? Ang hirap. Ayan. So we have to check kumpleto ba yung scoring materials natin. Also yung answer sheets, 'di ba? Kailangan laging may may mga ethical conflict na pwede bang photocopied na lang yung answer sheet or baka yung test test booklet naman ay original. Yun. So, isa yon sa mga ethical dilemma kasi pati yung answer sheet may bayad eh. And then, next, user qualification. Am I properly trained to use this instrument? So we have, siguro you have heard of the level A, level B, level C. Pag sinabing level A, sila po yung amenable to use, or they are allowed to use paper, to administer paper and pen tests. Yan. Pero kapag level B, ito yung mga paper and pen test din pero highly complex. Say for example, multidimensional or multifactorial tests. Pero kapag level C, sila naman yung allowed to administer projective tests. Medyo sa Philippines kasi hindi siya ganun ka-established na may bawas. Di ba tayo kapag psychometrician. Pero walang certification pa na allowed for level A, level B, level C testing. Wala pang ganun. So, possibly isa rin yun itong magiging direction in the future. Although sa states, ayan, may mga ganoong pong standard. Kapag ito level A, level B, level C qualifications. Ayan. Sige po, chat lang po kayo ha kapag may gusto kayong i-add or gustong i-share or itanong. Ayan. Next, factors that contribute to test scores. We have innate factors, background and environment, and personality. When we say innate, these are factors that really involve the subject or the student. And general ability niya, pati yung genetic niya. Special inherited abilities. Sa background, kumusta yung kanyang exposure, the cultural background, the formal training, experience with similar tests, the general health and handicaps. For personality, kumusta yung kanyang achievement motivation, interest in test problems, and anxiety. It's good to consider these things because it will help you interpret the test accurately and also to understand the student. Meron kasing iba na, yun ba yung ayaw niya mag-entrance test kasi ayaw niya dun sa university na yun. Wala siyang choice. O sige, sabi niya, sige, ibabagsak ko tong test. Yan. Pero mataas yung achievement motivation niya. Nakita niya yung mga test items, kayang-kaya niyang sagutan. Okay. So yun, pumasa din siya. So mga ganong factors, may mga ganong realities yung mga student natin. Also, may mga student din kasi na hindi ganun kataas yung, sabi natin hindi naman ganun talaga ka-cognitively performing, pero dahil sanay siyang mag-test, mag-take ng test na yon, nakailang culture fair na siya, nakailang ravens na siya, hanggang sa na-perfect na niya, or madali na lang sa kanyang sagutan yung mga items na yon. Meron yung mga mahilig sa Sudoku, di ba? Kaya mahilig sa abstract reasoning na mga challenge. Tapos pag yun pa yung mga naging test nila, yun pala yung kanilang exposure, so pwedeng dahil sa ganong factor kaya mataas yung kanyang score. Pero it's not really because of the general ability or the special inherited ability. Baka yung exposure lang niya ang mataas. So yan. So yun yung mga factors na naglalaro po. We also have the situation, the test demands, and the random variation. So when we say situation, it's the perceived importance of the test. So kasama ito when we, during the instruction phase, pag sinasabi natin sa kanila bakit kailangan makapasa or bakit natin i-administer yung test na ito, i-measure ang anong area ng kanilang pagkatao, cognitive ba to o personality. We also have the morale of the individual, sa kumusta siya nung time na yon, physical condition of the examinee at the time of the test, the interference from the environment, the influence from the tester, kasi baka ang tester ay masyadong mabilis magsalita at hindi na niya na-gets. Okay? Parang you're done, no questions, labas na siya. Paano na yung test taker? Or pwede rin naman na masyado siyang encouraging. So, lalong na-boost ang confidence ng bata. So, yung mga ganong factors. You also have test demands, special abilities required, the speed of response required, and the misleading items. And random variation, we have the guessing and clerical error. So, hindi mo naman din maaalis, minsan may time na kailangan mag-guess. Ayan, minsan, mali ang na-shade. Ayan. Pero ang B talaga yung sagot niya, pero nailagay niya sa C. Okay, now we go to the reporting of test scores. So these are some of the guidelines when we administer or when we report. Of course, we have to be knowledgeable about the test manual. Na yung kanina natin sinasabi, and then use effective general counseling skill, especially if we are going to share with them the result. Paano ba yung mga counseling skills natin dyan? Pwedeng may konting self-disclosure muna, di ba? Para ma-establish yung rapport mo. Tapos yung suggesting where you offer interpretation, ayan, of the scores that they have, of the behavior that appeared na ina-manifest nila. Ayan. Also have, ano bang mga counseling skills natin? Feedbacking, di ba? Kasama yun. And then develop methods of explaining results, especially depending of course sa ating client. Kung ang client mo ay ang school, sinabi ng school, okay, mag-administer kayo dito ng test battery kasi gusto namin makilala yung mga students namin. Okay? Pag gano'n, kailangan naka-PowerPoint presentation ka tapos may mga pie graph. Yan. Although, especially kapag tayo sa psych, no, we're in for research, we love data. Pag nakita ka ng mga numbers, mas gusto mo yung tabular presentation para mabilis sa'yo ma-analyze. Pero yung iba, ayaw ng numbers. So they'd rather see line graph, histogram, bar graph. Ayan. So you have to develop visual aids para mas madali nilang maintindihan. Okay. Next ay, ayan. Sorry po. Ano ba to? Yan, use descriptive terms rather than numerical scores. Explain results in terms of probabilities rather than certainties, and then summarize results and reiterate important points. Again, when we say descriptive rather than numerical, kasi again, kapag sabihin mo, ito po ang kanilang score ay 99 or ang kanilang score ay 79. Hindi mo alam, mas gustong marinig ng client mo kung ikaw ay high, low or average. Ayan. So mas okay, mas madali ma-comprehend yun kasi sabihin pa nasa 99th percentile po siya. So tanong pa niya anong percentile, 'di ba? Ayan. And we also use the term she tends to, she might, she seems, ayun. She is likely to, yan. We want to say it in probabilities rather than certainties, again, because, of course, this is not an absolute measure, diba, of personality or of the cognitive ability. We're just measuring tendencies. Okay. And then we have to assess the limitations, pero you have to discuss it using non-technical terms. So parang yun nga, descriptive rather than numerical. Involve client to address questions about the fit of results. Do you agree or do you disagree? How do you find the result? Is it true for you or not? Yan. Kailangan ma-express din niya yun. And then discuss in context with other client information. But that's the time we also need other records, yung mga non-standardized assessment natin to integrate dun sa result ng client. Okay. So for parents, we have to help them understand the testing procedure and the outcome. Especially kapag mga anak nila yung involved, sobrang tutok, di ba? Bakit ganito? Or ano ba talaga yung score ng anak ko? Paano ko siya matutulungan? Ayan. So discuss results using variety of techniques. It could be also graphical, presentation. Then focus on the child's abilities and not just on disabilities. Of course, we want to highlight that na Mrs. Yung anak po ninyo magaling po sa math. Ayan po yung kanyang sa multiple intelligence po niya. Ayan, hindi mo na sasabihin yung mga mababa siya. Although nandun din naman sa report. Ayan, pero highlight natin yung strengths ng bata. Okay, frame family's response into active coping approach wherein kung ito yung test result niya, paano siya matutulungan? Ano yung mga support na available at home? Pwede bang magkaroon ng mga bibilhan siya ng puzzles para ma-enjoy kung yun yung gusto niyang laro, o kaya paano ba yung interaction sa loob ng bahay kung gustong i-enhance yung social skills. Ayan, ay pwede na lang magawa. And then provide therapeutic environment where issues such as loss, anger, and frustration can be addressed. Ayan, so kapag mababa ang score, baka pag uwi ng bahay ay kung may ibang maging response yung parents. So dapat masettle na yun during that time habang nire-report natin yung test result. Then monitor the parents' reactions so that the child does not internalize their negative reactions. So we don't know how the parents would react or would relate to their child. Bawa sabihin mo, Ma'am, Mrs., ang anak po ninyo ay nasa average na intelligence level. Tapos pag unyo sa bata, hindi ka naman pala matalino. Nako, patay. 'Di ba? So kailangan ma-explain natin ng maayos sa parent. Kasi iba yung magiging interpretation ng bata. We also have two types of interpretation. First is descriptive, just to describe the client. It could also be genetic, to identify possible sources that affected the test score or result. Sabi natin yun nga, yung mga inherent abilities niya, kaya yung mga baka kung ang mother niya or ang father niya ay engineer, tapos nagmamanifest ang taas din talaga ng mathematical, analytical ability ng bata. So, yun. It could also be predictive, assess aptitude or adaptability. It could be evaluative when we use the test data in decision making. Okay. So these are the things that should be present during when we write our psychological report. Or syempre, it also varies based on the school, based on the company's need, di ba? Number 1, identifying information, date of report, the examiner, sino yung nagbigay ng test, kaya sino yung test proctor, referred by. So usually kapag ito yung mga companies na nagre-require yung applicant nila na magbigay ng neurocognitive, kaya mental health fitness. Ayan. So may mga nire-refer. Tapos evaluation procedures, ano yung mga ginawang tests na ano yung mga ginamit. Evaluation procedures, behavioral observations, background information, the test results, impressions and interpretations, diagnostic impressions, and the summary and recommendations. So again, kapag clinical, talagang kailangan tong diagnostic, pero depending sa need, baka hindi naman kailangan, impressions lang or test results, and then summary na agad. Sige. So question ulit tayo. Ayan. So Mona is about to communicate the test result to the client. In preparing for her meeting, what is the list that she should study in the manual? Is it A, development and item construction, B, scoring procedures, or C, interpretation or meaning of the scores obtained, or D, possible recommendations based on result? Sige. And the answer is correct po. No, letter A. Okay din yun. It's good to know how the test is developed and constructed, especially kapag namimili ka ng item ng test fit for your guidance testing program. Pero kapag ang focus mo na is reporting to the client, you won't discuss na ito po ay merong 0.6 validity coefficient. Ang sample hindi naman So dapat alam mo lang yung scoring, interpretation, and possible recommendations, especially sa parents. Doon sila nakafocus. Okay? Ayan, so it's already 10. Okay po tayo kahit bio break tayo for 5 minutes. Then let's be back 10:10. Break po muna tayo. Pwede kayo magtimpla ng kape or kumuha ng nuts. Pang-stimulate daw ng brain cells ang nuts eh. Ayan. Or CR, sige po. All right. So welcome back to our next part. We're finished already with the types of interpretation and psychological report format. Sige. Wait, I have to share again my screen. Now we proceed with the ethical issues in assessment. Share screen. Ayan. Okay. So based in our PGCA ethical guidelines, we have to be, Article 2, we have to be mindful of our relationship with our counselees. Section 2 says, shall establish and maintain good relations with their counselees and accordingly should explain the result of the test and other diagnostic tools in a comprehensive and constructive manner. So we really have to identify ulit paano ba talaga yung scoring procedure and stick on, again, descriptive rather than numerical way of interpreting the result. And then also it should be in not in a certain but in a probability manner yung pag-discuss natin. Article 4 naman, relationship with our colleagues in the profession. Guidance counselor shall establish with their colleague and accordingly shall give accurate information and avoid any misinterpretation or unclear explanation. That's why we really have to accurately report the test scores. No, kapag meron when we share our data to our co-counselors, kailangan maging transparent tayo. Of course, while still observing the ethical agreements natin pagdating sa confidentiality. Yan. As long as may informed consent naman ni client. Okay? Yan. We also have responsibility and invasion of privacy. Pag sinabi natin yung responsibility, counselors are responsible for the appropriate application, scoring, interpretation, and use of assessment instruments, whether they score and interpret such tests themselves or use computerized or other services. For invasion of privacy, kailangan ng informed consent. It involves informing the client about the nature of the information being collected and the purpose for which the results will be used. Relevance to counseling, we have to clearly state the purpose of the assessment and the benefits gained from the process. Yan. So paano kapag high profile yung client natin? Tapos mayroong gustong kumuha ng test data niya, bibigay mo ba? Wala yun sa scope ng informed consent, syempre, sa atin lang yun. Yan. Okay. Rights to results, the ACA Code of Ethics and Standard of Practice E3 states that regardless of whether the scoring and interpretation are completed by counselors, assistants, or computers, counselors take reasonable steps to ensure that the appropriate explanations are given to the client. Yan. Saan man siya in-administer, pero pag re-report mo na ang results sa client, dapat comprehensive. Ayan. Ma'am Roxanne, kailangan ay documented. Written talaga, yung may signature niya. Paano kapag bata pala? O sige. Paano kapag bata ang mga mga client natin? Sila ba yung pipirma ng informed consent? Sige nga, ano pong yan. Siyempre, pag minor, hindi pwedeng bata po, no? Although, meron din silang pipirmahan, yung assent form. Ayan. Chat ko po. Yan, yung assent form. Pero, kasama pa rin yung parent na magsasign. Especially kung clinical setting, kailangan po merong excuse me. Kailangan aware yung parents kung ano yung procedures na gagawin sa kanyang anak. Ayan. Informed consent kapag adult, kapag bata, assent form, plus, yun nga, may parental consent. Okay? So, right to confidentiality, securing test results, and seeking consent prior to disclosure of other parties. Yan. Securing test results and seeking consent prior to disclosure to other parties. So, paano kapag merong client na student natin, pagkatapos lumabas ito yung result niya, pwede ba nating ibigay sa principal to support bakit ganun yung behavior niya para ma-justify kung kailangan pa niyang mag-extend ng residency period. Nag-leave of absence siya for mental health. Yan. Kailangan mo munang hingi ng consent sa kanya kung allowed ka bang mag-release. Ayan. Pero, kung matatandaan po natin yung we can go beyond our vow for confidentiality if and only if there is a life and death issue. Ayan. Or life and death matter na yan, pwede na natin i-divulge. Right to the least stigmatizing label or proper diagnosis. Standards for education and psychological testing, 16.6 states that when score reporting includes assigning individual to categories, the categories chosen should be based on carefully selected criteria. Diba, halimbawa sa IQ, mayroong mga severe mental retardation, profound. Ang pangit kung i-report mo na na your child is severely or is mentally retarded. Pwede natin sabihin na based on the diagnosis, nag-fall siya within this range. Pero hindi siya mentally, nag-fall siya based on the test, the score, or based on the performance of the test, the child score is found within the range of blah, blah, blah. Yan. Pero hindi mo sasabihin na siya ay highly anxious siya. Kasi nililabel eh. Sabihin lang natin na doon siya nag-fall sa range na yun. Yan. And instead of saying that parang sick child with disability, disabled child, parang forever na kasi yun eh. Anxious child, depressed child, ayan, dapat ay child with depression, child with blank. Para pwede pa rin siyang matanggal or pwede hindi naka-attach talaga sa pagkatao niya yung ganung label. Okay? Ayan. Next ay technical standards for assessment and report. Practitioners should it's Article 7, the code or manual of technical standards for licensed and registered guidance counselors. So 1, practitioners should select standardized psychological tests that meet the purpose for which they are to be used and that are appropriate for their intended clients. Then practitioners must have professional knowledge, skills, and competencies in test administration, test interpretation, and preparing reports. So kung ang intended client natin ay adults, so we have to ensure that the tests that we are going to purchase really for adults. Okay, pag pangbata naman, dapat pangbata talaga. Yan, hindi pwedeng ano na lang, personality test lang basta meron. Ayan. Practitioner should interpret test scores based on the appropriate norms. Okay? So, mostly mga personality test po natin like, ano ba to? Yung NEOPI. NEOPI are meron yun female and male norms. So, yun din. Kailangan, ayan, thank you po. Thank you po, Ma'am Leia, for that. Pero hindi mo pa rin sasabihin na intellectually disabled child. Ayan. Sabihin lang natin, meron siyang intellectual disability. Ayun. Child with ganito, pero hindi intellectually disabled. Okay? Ayan. For example, sana tayo. Yun. So when we already have the score, okay, when you already have the score, we have to choose saan mo ba i-compare tong score na to sa norm ng pang female or pang male. Kaya sa norm ng pang grade 3 or pang grade 5. Yan. So depende po. So baka mamaya grade 3 yung bata, nagamit mo yung grade 5 norm, edi bumaba ngayon yung score niya. Pero compared with other grade 3, highly performing pala yung bata. Next, practitioners should examine and understand the specimen sets, test booklets, manuals, directions, answer sheets, scoring templates, and score reports before administering and assessing. Practitioners should take into account any differences in test administration practices or the client's familiarity with the test items. It's also good to ask kung na-take mo na ba itong test na to, no? Ayan, kasi familiarity could also hinder you from accurately measuring the intellectual performance of the subject or of the client. In selecting tests, practitioners should use tests that are culturally fair in terms of gender, ethnic background, religion, race, and handicap conditions. Okay. Meron pa tayo. Practitioners should be aware of clients' limitations in understanding language, use, and technical terminology. Practitioners should also ask the consent of a parent or guardian of a minor before giving assessment tools and explain the purpose of this. Question pala, no? Sa schools natin, depende po, again, pwedeng every time that you're going to administer the test, merong permit. Okay? Pero may iba naman, depende rin sa school, minsan yung ano lang, kasi meron tayo sa Data Privacy Act, diba? So meron ang papipirmahan talaga sa parents pag enrollment period pa lang na lahat ito yung institution na to, may time na magbibigay tayo ng mga questionnaire. Ayan. So kasama yon, pero i-ensure pa rin na i-observe yung Data Privacy Act. Okay. Practitioners should comply with the test administration, test scoring, test interpretation. Alam na natin yan. And then, practitioners should inform the client of the assessment results in a manner that is clearly understood. Napag-usapan natin kanina how to report the test results. We also have to stamp it with the word confidential. Okay, to ensure or to really establish that hindi na dapat ipakita kung kani-kanino lang yung test result na yun. Online, meron tayong mga encryption, data encryption na ginagawa. So pwedeng, especially ngayon pandemic tayo, so yung PDF form pwede mong i-save with password. Tapos at least hindi ma-access ng sino man yung file na yon unless may password sila. So we're sure na yung mga tao lang talaga na kailangan yon yung makaka-access. Okay. Practitioners should use assessment data by taking into account various factors and characteristics of the client being assessed that might affect practitioners' judgment or reduce the accuracy of the interpretation. And do not base assessments, recommendations, or test results that are outdated for the current purpose, and practitioners make reasonable efforts to maintain the integrity or security of tests and other assessment techniques. Ang kasama dito talaga ay yung pag-safekeep ng mga test items or test materials. Hindi pwedeng makikita lang yan sa table kung saan-saan. Kasi nga, pag na-increase na yung test familiarity, hindi na ito magiging valid measure for test. Kasi sanay na eh. Parang imbes na lang na take yan, nakabisado na nila yung mga items, diba? Yan. So we have to really safe keep the psychological tests. Yan. So yun. We have to ensure the qualification of the practitioner, the consideration of the condition of and about the examiner, the choice of test, and communicating the purpose and results of the test. So in summary, yun po yung mga technical standards that we have to observe when it comes to psychological testing. So kumusta tayo as the test giver or test administrator? Kumusta yung ating student? Kumusta or yung client natin? Fit ba siya to take the test? Or kumusta yung familiarity niya? Wala bang or fit din ba yung test para sa kanya? And then how are we going to report? Yan. For the practitioner, these are the technical standards: competence, commitment, professionalism, commitment to maintain integrity or security of the test, other assessment techniques, and number 4, avoidance of basing assessment, recommendation, or test results that are outdated for the current purpose. May mga test tayo na baka mahal natin binili pero hindi na talaga outdated na. Say for example, yung BOPI, Brainard Occupational Preference Inventory. Alam na lang natin ito by the book pero hindi na po ito ginagamit. Ang mas bago-bago ngayon yung mga Oasis. Yan. So we also have yung ONET yan, to identify the career interests. Yan. So for practitioners, kailangan malaman din natin kung i-examine natin ay okay ba yung language na English sa kanya? O baka hindi siya nakaka-comprehend ng English. Tapos verbal yung test mo, di ba? Hindi magiging accurate yung measurement mo ng intellectual ability niya. Ayan. For the choice of testing, kailangan ay culture fair, and then may appropriate norms. Ayan. Okay. Keep in mind also that licensed guidance counselors from foreign countries must have the following qualifications for them to be issued a special permit to practice in the Philippines. Kailangan they are internationally well-known guidance counselors or outstanding experts in the psychological testing and assessment. Their services are necessary for the advancement of psychological testing through transfer of technology. Their services are free and limited to a diligent clients, in particular hospitals, centers, or clinics. And then they are exchange professors in any branch or specialty of guidance and counseling. On the case of psychological testing in schools, colleges, and universities, offering the course guidance and counseling. Kasi nga, meron din kasing provisions na sa po natin, RA 9258, kailangan mga nagtuturo din ng counseling ay mga RGC. Ayan. So same with testing. It better kung sila ay merong license. Magtuturo tapos hindi license. Ayan. Bagay, depende rin naman sa experience. Meron namang mga nakapasa sa hindi nag-board pero yung sa grandfather's clause. Okay, sige, let's try this question. Mimi is preparing a test battery for an 8-year-old child who was just rescued by the local social welfare office from an abusive father. She was locked in a basement for 4 years. Mimi didn't have a formal education, can only speak few words, and is very anxious when meeting new people. All assumptions on preparing a test battery should be observed except, sige po. Is it A, B, C, or D? Okay. Yeah. What are your context clues, ma'am? Sino ba kanina? Sige po. Ma'am Zoraida, would you like to try? Ano yung mga context clues that led you to that answer? Because that answer is correct. Sige po.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
For me po, kasi anxious na siya, ma'am eh. And siguro yung trauma ng bata is, well, a cognitive test din po kasi is so mental, no? So, parang hindi po siya, parang out of the context po talaga yung cognitive test, tapos verbal yung test na i-conduct sa kanya or i-administer sa kanya or yung process. So, for me po, out of the choices na po talaga siya kasi siya lang yung far out, yung B. Yun po.
Okay. Ayan. Thank you po. Ang isa pa ay, kasi si Mimi ay wala siyang formal education. Yan, can only speak few words. Tapos kung bibigyan mo pa siya ng verbal test, paano niya sasagutan yung, 'di ba? Kung hindi naman niya strength talaga yung language. Ayan. So, para to make it correct, the cognitive test should be non-verbal. Pero kung magbibigay ka man ng test battery to assess yung cognition niya, pwede naman 'yun. Kasi test battery ang pangit naman kung test battery mo pero personality test, di ba? So, hindi naman pwede yun. Dapat may cognitive abilities din. Pero, should be culture fair, should be non-verbal. Alright? Sige. So, moving forward, asa na tayo? Slide. Ay, ayan. So, we have models and theories in applied testing. So, syempre, alam natin that the tests, psychological tests, are actually based on some models or some theories. And the board exam sometimes would pop up, magpa-pop out yung mga questions related to the theories. Kung anong theory yung sinunod or yung naging inspiration ng ganitong test na yan. So, let's study them or let's review. For testing or for intelligence, we have these theories. Spearman's G-factor model of intelligence. When we say G-factor, according to Spearman, intelligence is a homogeneous construct, and everyone has a G-factor or a general ability factor that influences performance and correlated with specific factors that influence performance in specific intellectual tasks. Okay? So, merong G-factor of intelligence. Okay. For Guilford, parang basta it's a homogeneous. Yun na yung general ability ang intelligence. For Guilford naman, structure of intelligence theory, merong 180 unique intellectual factors that organize around 3 dimensions of mental operations, content, and product. Okay, so naka-categorize siya into major factors, yung 3 dimensions na yan, pero may 180 sa baba nila. Then Thurstone's 7 primary mental abilities. We have 7 interrelated factors such as verbal comprehension, word fluency, number facility, perceptual speed, memory, space, and reasoning. Itong space po yung concept natin sa figures, yung sa depth, ganyan. Vernon's hierarchical approach contended that there was a G and 2 second-order effect. Ayan. VED representing verbal and educational aptitudes, and KM representing K is yung kinesthetic, yung spatial, mechanical, and practical aptitude. Okay. Kay Spearman din po pala yun nga, may G factor at meron ding, ayan, kay Thurstone naman, merong S or so merong 7 factors. Kung kita natin ulit, kapag kay Spearman, may G-factor. Kapag kay Guilford, 180, 3 dimensions. Kapag kay Thurstone, S or 7 mental abilities. Kapag kay Vernon, may 2. Yung verbal educational at kinesthetic mechanical. Yung KM. Okay, we also have Catel's second order effects propose that fluid abilities are biologically determined, while crystallized abilities are acquired skills and knowledge influenced by cultural, social, and educational experience. Okay? Fluid abilities, meaning to say, ito po yung parang nag-e-evolve, nagbabago, nag-i-improve through time. Pero yung crystallized, ito yung mga skills na fixed na. Diba, pag sintas ng sapatos, ito yun. Yun yung procedure, pag toothbrush, yun yung talagang way to do it. Pero yung fluid, nabawa, yung the way we understand scenario, situations, nung minsan nakikita mo siya sa ganito, pag bata tayo, pero as we mature, nag-iiba siya. Ayan, so fluid. Piaget cognitive development theory suggested a developmental progression with individuals moving sequentially through the stages of sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operations, and formal operations period. So we know, according to Piaget, infants, they improve their cognitive skills through sensory or through their senses and through their movements. Diba? Kung ano yung nakikita nila, kung ano yung mga object permanence, diba, na dati kasi pag in peekaboo, kaya sila nasya-shock kasi, ay, meron palang ganun. Tapos akala nila wala ulit, tapos meron ulit. Pero darating yung time na alam na nila na yung mga bagay, kahit hindi nila nakita, andyan pa rin, nag-e-exist pa rin. So that's object permanence. They get information through their senses, what they can hear, what they can see, they can smell, they can taste. Ayan. And sense of touch. Pre-operational, so alam natin, developing naman yung brain, pero pre-operational pa nga lang. Okay, so nandyan po yung mga animism, akala nila, yung mga, they tend to, to think na pwedeng magsalita yung mga ibang ibang mga characters, yan, so animism, gumagalaw, na-animate, or ano pa ba, meron din sila yung hindi pa nila ma-comprehend yung pagkakaiba ng weight at saka ng mass, 'di ba? Na pag concrete kasi alam nila na pag yung 1 kilo 'yun. Pero regardless of anong item 'yun, kung bakal man yan or bulak, pag pre-operational, mag-pre-operational yung child, hindi pa nila kaya i-comprehend na yung 1 kilong bulak at 1 kilong bakal ay magkaparehas lang. Ayan, ng bigat. Ayan. And concrete, so yun na nga, they know already rules in terms of grammar, language, it's concrete. But for formal operations, syempre mas develop na, they can also understand yung mga abstract reasoning, mas develop na yung critical thinking nila. Ayan. Concrete operations is for school children. Formal operations starts po ng 12 onwards. Vygotsky's socio-cultural theory suggested a developmental theory emphasizing the role of culture and social interaction. So for Vygotsky, there is the role of the MKO, or the more knowledgeable others, that could really help the child to achieve the ZPD, or the zone of proximal development. Na po, no? Yung ZPD at yung MKO. Through scaffolding. Ayan, kailangan i-shot ko nga para manood nyo rin. Scaffolding. Ayan po. So it's the process wherein the MKO, or the more knowledgeable others, is helping the child to reach the zone of proximal development. Ayan, scaffolding. And we also have information processing theory that focuses on how individuals process information mentally. We also have Sternberg's triarchic theory that incorporates 3 sub-theories: the internal world of the individual, or mental processes that underlie intelligence; the experiential sub-theory; the contextual, or the external world of the individual. So may 3 sub-theories, kaya triarchic yung theory. We also have Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, which is nag-evolve talaga. So before nag-start siya sa ngayon, ayan, frames of minds. In some circles, there are 9. We have the spatial, linguistic, logical, mathematical, bodily, kinesthetic, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, tapos may existential din. Yan. Ay, wait. Yung sa spatial intelligence po, no, so sila rin yung sa magaling po sa sa yung mga visual, ayan, visual analysis ng mga figures, tapos yung sa depth, ayan, bodily kinesthetic, alam natin yung movement, ayan. Naturalistic, more on yung mga ang strength nila ay nasa field, outdoors, investigative na plants and animals ang preferred nila. Ayan. Pero interest na nila at the same time, yun talaga, dun sila mas nag-excel. We also have the past theory or the planning, attention, arousal, simultaneous, and successive theory of intelligence. This theory is based on the assumption that girls outperform boys on tests of verbal fluency, foreign languages, fine motor skills, speech articulation, reading and writing, and math calculation, and they have been found to do better on tasks such as mental rotation, mechanical reasoning, math and science, knowledge, and verbal analogies. Kaya talagang merong norming magkaiba no kapag female-male. Yan. So we also have intelligence testing, interpretation of scores, although we'll talk more about this when we proceed with the statistical foundations of testing. Pero based on theories yan, and computations, they derive from 90 to 99 percentile, we can consider it as superior to very superior intellectual faculty. 60 to 89 percentile, high average to above average intellectual faculty. 40 to 59 percentile is considered as the average, mga nasa 50 na range average intellectual faculty. 25 to 39 percentile is the low average intellectual faculty. 10 to 24 percentiles below average intellectual faculty, and 1 to 9 ito yung very low to low intellectual faculties. Sila yung talaga intellectually challenged individuals. Okay. So we also have this description for IQ. Pag 130 plus, it could be regarded as very superior. 120 to 129 is superior. 110 to 119 ay high average. 90 to 109 average. Okay. 80 to 89 is low average. 70 to 79 ay nasa borderline, and 69 and below extremely low. Yan. So we can also see from the percent of population that most individual ay nasa range ng average, 90 to 109. Okay. We also have some issues in intelligence testing. Kumusta? Is the intelligence stable? Intelligence is mostly steady through adulthood with slight declines that occur around age 65 in fluid intelligence. Okay. So, baka we want to achieve a valid and reliable measure of intelligence. Pero the question, is intelligence stable? So, kaya meron tayong mga test design talaga for children, like for WAIS, di ba? Ang WAIS ay adults. Ang WIPC ay for preschoolers. We have the WISC for children. Magkakaiba. Depende sa developmental stage. Walang isang test that could, depende na lang sa norming po, no? Pero, yun. Kasi nga ang intelligence ay nagde-develop. Ayan. Nag-i-improve, nag-change. What do intelligence test scores predict? There is no generally agreed definition of intelligence. Like for example, si Howard Gardner, di ba, iba yung intelligence niya, kay Spearman, iba. Ayan. So intelligence tests appear to be related to academic performance. That's why we also have a responsibility to our clients na explain natin kung ano yung i-measure ng scale na ito. Ayan. At hindi niya i-measure. Is intelligence hereditary? Genes appear to have a substantial influence on performance on intelligence tests, but environmental factors also have a significant impact on intellectual development. Ayan. Is intelligence hereditary? Increasing trend of IQ scores due to the improvement in nutrition, test sophistication, changes in educational opportunities, and parenting styles. So, meron din talagang environmental factors. No? Pagdating sa exposure nga, it's not the G factor that we're measuring, but the amount of external support, environmental support, kaya niya na-reach yung ganong score or development. Okay, so we also have different personality theories and models, such as dispositional domain, personality traits that are stable over time. We also have biological domain that views personality as evolutionary, genetic, and physiological underpinnings of personality. Yan. Intrapsychic domain that views personality as mental mechanism of personality which operate outside consciousness. Yan. Kaya ito yung sa projective tests, pagka-intrapsychic. Cognitive experiential domain, how people experience the world and process information about it. Social and cultural domains, personality affects and is affected by the social and cultural context. We also have adjustment domains, wherein the focus is on how people cope and function. So yun yung mga nagiging scope din ng ating personality, and sabi natin ang personality test ay of course considered as affective tests din. So just to share with you, there are different types of affective tests. Wait lang. Share another slide. Medyo ang hirap naman ito. Okay. Yan. So, we have cognitive, affective, and performance scales. So kapag focus muna po tayo sa affective scales, so meron tayong different types of affective scales na which are attitude, beliefs, dispositions, values, and interest. Kapag sinabi nating attitude, these are learned predispositions to respond in a consistently favorable manner with respect to a given object. Yan. So pwedeng positive attitude if it's favorable or if you agree to it, negative if you find it against your values. Ayan. So pwedeng negative din yung attitude mo doon. O hindi katanggap-tanggap. Yan. We also have beliefs or the judgments and evaluations that make about ourselves, about others, and about the world around us. Yan. Judgment and evaluations that we make about ourselves, about others, and about the world around us. So if meron kayong na-encounter na ganun, this is an example of a affective scale. We also have values, principle and fundamental convictions which act as a general guide to behavior, the standards by which particular actions are judged to be good or desirable. So meron tayong mga tinatawag na work value scale, di ba? To assess kung natatandaan nyo ba kung kaninong theory yun? Tapos na ba kayo tapos na kayo kay career, kay Ma'am Dane. Ayan. So yung ano pong theory yun? Yung sabi na kailangan kinoconsider mo yung values mo if you are going to thrive in a particular career. Okay, konting review lang po. Values po at sa career. Ayan, correct. Thank you, Ms. Jemima. No? Si Brown. Dwayne Brown. Ayan. That is, I know you're still with me. Again, I used different version po ng ating Microsoft Word, kaya nag-iba din yung file. Pero hopefully you can still see. Ayan. Don't worry, I'll give you a copy. Ayan. We also have dispositions guided by beliefs and attitude related to values, which is also considered as a stable trait or a personality characteristic that serve as an automatic orientation or inclination to respond to life circumstances. So meron tayong yung trait or state. Diba? Pag sinabi natin trait, ito yung stable, relatively enduring aspect of the self. Pero kapag state, ito yung mabilis, yung temporary lang. Yan. The dispositions considered as a trait. Interest is a liking or disliking state of mind accompanying the doing of an activity. So kasama dito yung mga career interests. Yan. And then to ensure that the test is really okay, 'di ba? Kailangan sabi natin okay alam natin yung items, okay? Alam natin yung paano siya dinevelop, paano siya na-ensure na valid and reliable. Okay. So next, I will discuss naman paano ba natin i-ensure yung item writing. Paano kapag tayo naman yung gagawa ng test? First, lalo na paano kapag walang test? wala kayong mabili tapos kasi kulang sa budget, problema talaga natin yun, anong gagawin natin? So pwede kaya na tayo mismo gagawa ng sarili nating test? Pwede po. Pero we have to observe certain guidelines. So number 1 ay yan. And define clearly what you want to measure. Or ano ba talaga yung kailangan natin, ano ba yung gusto mo? Ito bang self-concept? Ito bang self-efficacy? Kasi magkaiba yon. So baka kailangan mong humanap ng theory for that. Paano kapag walang theory? Yan, baka kailangan mo pang mag-establish, gumawa ng grounded theory na research for that. Ayan. And then, we have here some literatures. We have the magazines, dictionary, encyclopedia, textbooks, unpublished monographs, and internet website and journal articles, which you can see different discussions, explanation about a certain variable. Pero we have to ensure that these are reputable. So itong magazines hanggang internet website, we can't really ensure na updated sila at psychologically diniscuss yung variable. It's always best to base your scale or the items that you're going to write, the tests you're going to create based sa journal. Because journals are peer-reviewed by expert psychologists and they can also provide updated studies sa construct na yun. Okay, so kung meron ka ng theory time to write the item, so you can generate an item pool. Theoretically, all items are randomly chosen from a universe of item content. And then avoid redundant items. Items are samples of behavior. Especially kapag you want to, ano bang mga ano natin? Self-concept. Okay. So madaming areas or madami kang statement na pwedeng ilagay to measure self-concept. Kasama doon yung I feel confident about myself. Pwedeng sa feeling, no? I believe that I am liked by others. Ayan. So, those items are sample behaviors that could actually create a picture of a person who has a good self-concept or merong low or high self-concept. Yan. Pero we have to avoid redundant kasi baka mamaya, ayan na, I'm a cheerful person, tapos meron ding I'm a happy person. Yan. So, hindi rin magiging accurate yung ating, hindi magiging valid. Magkakaroon ng problems sa reliability kapag redundant lang yung items natin. Avoid exceptionally long items which are rarely good because it can create confusion. Ayan. Pag masyado nang mahaba, it's hard to identify ano ba talaga yung mini-measure. Keep the level of reading difficulty appropriate for those who will complete the scale. So if it's for grade 3, dapat ang reading difficulty ay fit syempre for grade 3. Kasama kaya na-observe natin, 'di ba, yung mga pangbata na test items, malalaki yung font at saka maiksi lang yung sentences. Pero kapag naging high school na yan or college, mas lumiliit yung font at mas marami na yung maiksi nagiging paragraph na, 'di ba? Ayan. So it depends upon the examinee. And then avoid double-barreled items which convey two more ideas at the same time. And then consider mixing positively and negatively worded items. Sometimes respondents develop the acquiescence response set, which is the tendency for them to agree on most items without fully understanding them, especially if they are in a rush. And then, kunyari, ikaw yung researcher na pwede pong magpasagot ng survey, tapos nakita nila na hindi naman nakamix yung item, so they'll just answer 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. Lahat positively worded, di ba? Hindi na binasa lahat. Ayan. So, pwedeng pag ganon, na nakamix yung positively and negatively worded items, so just have to keep in mind ano yung mga negatively worded para pag in-score na natin, sila yung i-reverse score. Okay. To avoid the acquiescence response set. Ayan. So we have here an example. Sa Adamson College Depression Scale, I feel sad most of the time. And then I feel hopeful about the future. So the participants or the subject would really read the items kasi alam niya na yan, may mixing ng positively and worded I. Pag nilagay niya dito 4, I feel sad, tapos 4 din yung hopeful, parang contradicting. Yan. So, kailangan ay nakamix. Yan. Also have to avoid the bad items. Usually, ito po yung mga, sabi nga, exceptionally long statements. I am satisfied with my wages and hours at the place where I work. It is considered double-barreled because you can be satisfied with your wage or with your salary but not too satisfied with the hours. Ang taas ka ng sahod pero a graveyard shift. Ayan, hindi ka naman makatulog na maayos. It's double-barreled. So the best thing to do is to separate. I'm satisfied with my wages. I'm satisfied with the hours at the place where I work. Ayan. 2 items na siya. Okay. There are also double negative, like I am not in favor of Congress passing the law and not allowing any employer to force any employee to retire. Haba, di ba? Pero it's double negative kasi, again, you can be in favor of the first, pero not in favor of the second, or vice versa. Again, splice the item, make it 2. Now, number 3, most people favor death penalty. What do you think? Yan. So it's leading. Bakit? Kasi the person would have a second thought kung sasabihin ba niya na hindi ako in favor. Kasi nga most people already favored death penalty. Tapos biglang hindi siya in favor. Yan. So we have to ensure that our questions are really neutral, stated in neutral manner. Yan. para hindi leading ang ating interview questions. Malaman talaga natin kung ano yung nasa loob ng ating client. Yan. We also have to choose ano ba yung appropriate item format. Isip, kanina na naaral natin yung iba't ibang types ng test. Pero mayroon ding iba't ibang item format when we write items for the test. For example, dichotomous, which offers 2 alternatives for each item. Pag sinabi nating 2 alternative, it could either be yes or no. It could be true or false, diba? Like or dislike. The advantages is it is simple and easy to administer. It can be scored quickly and it requires absolute judgment. Absolute kasi ayaw or gusto. Diba? Walang medyo. Walang parang. Talagang ayaw lang or gusto. Or true or false lang. The disadvantage is if it's used in ability test, it encourages memorization, test of luck and response style, and forced choice. Yan. Kung ability test kasi, kailangan mong mamili, kahit di ka sure, kaya pwede kang mag-guess. Pero, tapos pag forced choice pa, paano may time talaga na hindi siya oo at hindi talaga. 'Di ba? Merong time na somewhat lang or unlikely, very likely, nire-range. Yeah. So yun yung nagiging disadvantage ng dichotomous. You also have polytomous that offers more than 2 alternatives. When we say polytomous, could also be polycotomous. Parehas lang po yun. Ang example nito ay ang mga multiple choice. Ayan, multiple choice. Easy to administer and score, uses distractors or incorrect choices, and requires absolute judgment, and reduces guessing. Okay, kasi nga may mga choices, so ang guessing mo na lang siguro yung mga choices, pero hindi from out of nowhere yung mga guess natin. Ayan. Pero a disadvantage is if it's used in ability test, it can encourage test of luck and response style, forced choice. Kasi paano kapag may iba ka pang explanation na wala dun sa A, B, C, D, di ba? That's a disadvantage. Polytomous or polycotomous. Multiple choice. We also have the Likert formats. Ito na yung sagot doon sa problem sa absolute judgment sa dichotomous po, no? Requires the respondent indicate the degree of agreement with a particular attitudinal question. Instead of asking for a yes or no, pwede magkaroon ng 5 or 7 alternatives pa nga, which would help the client describe kung ano talaga yung totoo sa kanya. With strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Yan. Positively worded items are normally scored, while negatively are reversely scored, or reversed first before must score. We also have category format, similar to the Likert format but uses a scale which holds greater number of choices. People can rate items on a 10-point scale. One variation is the visual analog scale, where the respondent is given a 100-centimeter line and asked to place a mark between 2 well-defined points para i-gauge na nasaan ka dito sa 100-centimeter line. Asang area ka, asan ka dyan? Kung 100 yung pinaka in pain, dito naman yung sa 0 yung hindi ka in pain. So nasan ka dyan? Baka magdodrawing siya from 70 to 80 or from 80 to 90. Ayan. Visual analog scale. You also have the checklist. Receives a long list of descriptive or adjectival statements and indicates whether each one is characteristic of him or herself or someone else. We also have the Q sort. It's a combination of the checklist format and the category format. The subject is given statements and asked to sort them into 9 piles. Parang usually po sa kids binibigay din to para yung may pagka-kinesthetic, hindi lang sila mag-shade. Ayan, meron silang mga cards tapos ipapile nila kung saan sila. Ayan, parang ito po yun. So, mayroong characteristics from 1 to 9, tapos ilalagay nila kung sino sila talaga, how true is this characteristic for them. Halimbawa, cheerful. So they find themselves as very cheerful, so lalagay nila sa +4. Ipapile nila yung card doon sa may +4 or sa 9. Yan. Tapos kapag meron yung characteristic na tamad, feeling ko hindi naman ako masyadong tamad. So lalagay lang niya sa -3. Dito niya Ayan. Dito niya ilalagay. Ayan. Tapos, pwede rin naman na, dito, madaling makibagay. Hindi naman masyado, pero pwede na rin. So, baka ilalagay niya dyan. Ayan. So, dito po, ito yung mga characteristics na ipapile nila na average, in average nilang napapakita. Sabi nga yung nalalagay sa 3, kung Likert scale to ng 1 to 5, 3. So, dito yon. Pero the characteristics that are strongly them or that they manifest, lalagay nila most likely sa areas na ito po, 3 and 4. Yan. Tapos yung mga talagang hindi sila, imposible maging sila. Yan. Okay, so that's one way to format. Next ay, ayan. So we also have steps in test construction. Okay, first, we have to survey. Okay, steps in test construction. Given na, saan na tayo? Given po na, ito na tayo, no, na meron na tayong, ayan, mga items na nagawa. Ayan, so check natin. So, okay na ako. Meron ng items. Paano na natin i-ensure na valid to and reliable? Ayan, first, okay, so may literature search ka na, may theory ka na. Ayan. Tapos, ito yung time na meron ka na ring usually po ang table of specs ginagawa for teaching dito sa mga teacher-made tests. So, meron talagang table of specs. Pero kapag mga psychological test po, gumagamit din ng tawag dito ng EFA. Ayan, EFA and CFA to determine ano ba yung mga subscales or ano ba yung mga areas na kailangan i-measure para accurately ma-measure yung isang construct. Ano yung may mga dimensions na yon. Ayan. Halimbawa po, ang table of specifications kasi ginagawa yun to ensure yung content validity ng scale. So for example, si teacher, ano mo na, just to relate, kung si teacher nag-discuss ng topic about matter, tapos diniscuss niya isa-isa yung liquid, solid, gas. So dapat sa test na gagawin niya, meron talagang, may 30 items siya na test. So dapat may 10% ng test would be about liquid, characteristic of liquid, 10% of the test, the totality of the 30 item test, or kailangan about solid, kailangan about gas. Ayan, para well represented lahat ng diniscuss. Kasi mamaya, kung walang table of specifications, ang number of items pala ay mas marami about gas. Hindi na na-assess yung liquid and solid. Ayan. Yun po yung table of specs to identify yung content validity. Kung ang goal ni teacher, kung diniscuss niya ay matter, tapos gusto niyang i-assess kung gaano karami yung understanding, yung comprehension, how strong yung or effective siya sa pagtuturo ng matter, yan, kailangan yung lahat ng areas na diniscuss niya matatouch. Okay. The same with a psychological construct. Kung ang psychological construct natin ay self-concept. So, kung self-concept is a very broad concept, ano yung mga areas na dapat nandun? Dapat ba merong yung pananaw sa sarili, tapos yung pananaw niya kung paano siya tinatanaw ng ibang tao? Yan. So, dapat may mga items po na related doon. Yan. Usually, it depends on the theory itself. So, kung ano yung mga theory ng wellness, kaya ng kaginhawahan, and may iba't ibang mga areas yon. Kailangan, mayroon din tayong specific items. Yan. So, item writing and format. So, kanina, yan, diniscuss na natin po yung item writing and format. Now, we move to the phase and content validity. Pag sinabi nating phase, it's not really identified as formal form of validity, no? Kasi nga wala naman tayong statistical measures to do that. We just as subject matter experts, we just evaluate if this test is fit for a child, yung itsura ng test, no? Kung ito ba ay credible looking for adult, for industrial setting, for clinical setting. Ayan. For content validity, we make use of content validation forms. Diba? Meron tayong mga pinapasagutan for subject matter experts like ito yung item, tapos i-gauge ni subject matter expert kung ito ba ay acceptable or kailangan i-revise lang or rejected talaga. Ayan. Pwedeng ganon. Meron ding isang paraan itong item prototypicality. Item prototypicality. Yan. So, po. Pag sinabi nating item prototypicality, the subject matter expert will gauge the item based on the theory, how much does this concept does this item represent the construct it intends to measure. Kunyari, ito ay depression, tapos may nakalagay na I feel unhappy most of the time. So, i-rate niya kung 1 is kapag ino-observe talaga, very true ito sa features ng depression based sa DSM. Yan. Tapos, 11 naman kapag talagang nagmamanifest ito or very true siya kung ano yung nasa DSM. Na 5 kung hindi masyado and 1 kapag hindi talaga. Okay? Tapos merong 5 na experts, tapos i-evaluate lahat ng scorings nila per item. Yung 1 to 11 na yun. No? Baka merong item na sinanirate ni subject matter expert 1 na 8, yung isa naman nilagay niya 7, yung isa 11, yun. Tapos i-identify yon yung mean noon. Kung saan nagfo-fall yung evaluation nilang 3 o nilang 5. Dito ba sa closer to 11 or closer to 1? So usually kapag closer to 1, tinatanggal na yung item. Pero pag closer to 11, ayan, ina-accept yung item. Pero yung mga nasa 6 to 7 needs revision. Opo, Ma'am Marcelia, no, yung table of specs po ginagamit to ensure din content validity. Especially kapag teacher-made yung mga tests. Ayan. Pero for personality, although yun, nagbibigay din naman tayo ng table of specs, halimbawa nga based sa theory sa DSM. So yun na lang. Sa DSM, merong mga characteristic ng depression. Kunyari may 5. Tapos dapat meron kang 5 samples of meron kang behavior or may items na magde-describe ng mga 5 features na yon. Yun. So kung bawat 5 features na nandun sa DSM ng depression, nagawan mo ng item, masasabi mo na content valid. May content validity. Pero subject pa po to sa review ha. Yun. Pero kapag sa DSM, merong 5 features to identify na ang isang client ay depressed, pero ang ginawan mo lang ng item ay yung 3. Ayan, kulang. So, hindi siya ganun ka-accurate. Okay, yung content validity. Ayan. So, given, okay na. So, na-review na ni subject matter expert yung items natin, yung content, kung okay ba, kung is it true to the theory or not. Now, we're ready for the first trial run. And first trial run, expect na natin, marami doon mga loose ends. Yan. Kasi, hindi pa ganun ka-establish yung test. Kasama na doon, hindi mo alam kung gaano katagal yung test. Yan, i-comprehend or sasagutan. At yun din yung i-identify mo actually. Ayan, kapag at least nag-gauge mo, na-average pala kaya na itong tapusin ng 15 minutes. Yan. Para pag binuo mo yung manual, ilalagay mo na sa instruction. Diba? Magsuot ka ng manual, this test can be answered in 15 minutes. Nakukuha po yun sa mga pilot testing or sa trial runs. Yun. Pero during first trial run, ang pinaka-focus lang nito is to check kung naiintindihan ba if the items are fit to your participants. Kumusta yung reading difficulty? Kumusta yung language used? Baka sa iyo, natandaan ko tuloy dati, meron kaming binisita sa Baguio. Tapos may tanong kami na anong mga hamon ang napaharap sa'yo. Pag sa atin kasi hamon, ewan ko, parang hamon kasi is challenge, di ba? Challenge sa English. Pero sa kanila hamon. Yung ibang participants na confused sa hamon. Naging hamon. Naging ham tuloy. So, yun. So, yung sa may consider natin. Let's first trial run. O pag na-identify natin, medyo ano pala tong word na hamon sa kanila, di ba baguhin na natin? O anong mga pagsubok? Ayan. First trial run. Second trial run, ito na po yung, based on the feedback we got from the first trial run, may mga items na ni-revise, binago yung words, okay, dinevelop, ayan, try ulit natin. Kumusta? Smooth na ba yung pag-a-administer ng test? Ayan. So kung okay na, and that's the time we can already establish the validity and the reliability as well as the norms if you really intend to make a standardized test. Kailangan kompleto yung procedure. Walang standardized test na hindi dumaan sa norming. Ayan. Pero hindi lahat naman ng may norm ay standardized na agad. Okay? Kasi kapag may norm lang siya pero walang standardized or walang prescribed way to administer, score, and interpret the test, it is not standardized. Okay. So for example, establishing the validity, most likely, for example, you have the self-concept scale. You're going to look for an established self-concept scale and compare the scores that your participant got from the trial run. Okay. Probably sa sa second trial run, compare mo na kumusta yung score nila. Kung dito 89, tas high yung result, dapat high din dun sa well-established na self-concept scale. So what we usually do is through statistics. Yan, Pearson R, since interval data po yung self-concept, diba? Ayan. Yung mga scores natin usually sa psychological testing. So Pearson R, tapos kapag mataas yung result, mga 0.9, 0.9, mga 0.8, yan, we can say that the test is valid. Yan. Reliability naman is the, of course, the consistency of the scores. So, pwede tayong mag-undergo ng, teka lang, nasa na ba yun? Meron akong slide for that. Although, babalikan pa natin yun ulit. Ayan. So, pwede tayo magbigay ng retest na after a month, bibigyan natin sila ulit ng test. Hindi pwedeng more than 1 year kasi wala na po yun. Hindi na ganun kabisa. It's hard for us to identify the standard error of measurement. Ayan. So at least a month. And then parallel forms or alternate form, pwedeng ganun din wherein we're going to create set A and set B of the test. Tapos kailangan consistent yung magiging sagot. Kung high yung self-concept niya sa set A, dapat sa set B, high pa din. Excuse me. So it can also be split half na kunyari ang haba ng test mo, 100 items. So pwedeng yung 1 to 50 at saka yung 51 to 60. Ayan. Hahatiin mo lang. Hahatiin mo lang sa dalawa. O pwede mong i-administer ng magkasama, yung 1 to 100, pwede mo rin paghiwalayin ng set na 1 to 50 tsaka 51 to 100. And then i-evaluate kung mataas ba yung consistent ba yung result. Ayan, through this statistical tools. Ayan. We also have inter-item consistency. Inter-item consistency po ay chine-check yung relationship ng bawat item sa bawat item. So, see what's the relationship between item 1 and item 2. So, item 1 and item 3, item 1 to item 4. Yun, mataas ba ang relationship or mababa? Yun. Kapag mataas, halimbawa 0.9, ganyan, makikita na possible, minimeasure lang nila yung isang bagay. So, better tanggalin na lang yung item. Ayan. Inter-item correlation po yun. Pero, ang inter-item consistency naman ay nakikita through Cronbach alpha. Ayan. Meron po yun sa SPSS na formula. Pakita ko sa inyo sa susunod nating session din. Paano malalaman kung kailan dapat tanggalin yung item, if the alpha is if this item is deleted, ano mangyayari sa cronback alpha, mag-increase ba or hindi. Ayan. We also have interscorer. Pag sinabing interscorer naman, based ito sa mga experts. First time nilang gagamit nung parang behavioral checklist mo to detect ADHD. Yan. Kumusta yung pag-evaluate nila? Pare-parehas ba? Okay. Kapag pare-parehas, ibig sabihin, good yung mga questions mo or good yung items mo. Ayan. Pero kapag vague yung items, posibleng mag-iba-iba rin sila ng evaluation. Walang interscorer reliability. Okay. Ayan. Okay. Tapos sa norms naman po, ayan, since ito na, medyo napag-usapan natin yung mga validity, reliability. Ang norms naman ay to identify paano ba natin i-interpret yung scores in the future, yung mga other test takers, kailangan meron tayong normative sample. Usually po nasa thousands yung norms, tas iba-iba pa yan. May norm for female, norm for male, or norm based sa developmental age, okay? Or grade norms, depende sa grade level. Yon. And keep in mind, yung mga naging participant mo sa first trial run, hindi na sila yung pwedeng mag-take ulit sa second and sa final. Palagi pong bago yon kapag magta-test development tayo. Kailangan talaga marami tayong network. Okay, so pag okay na yon yung mga procedures na ito po, this the time we can already prepare the test manual. Okay, especially kapag may norms, ayun, we can ensure the standardization by ensuring na meron ng prescribed direction for administration, scoring, and interpreting the tests. Okay. Yan po ang ating buong procedure for the norms. Questions po so far? Okay. So right now, let's have some exercise po, no, to identify how familiar we are in terms of psychological tests. I'll share with you one activity. Lang po. Mhm. Saka lang, ito na lang pala muna. Para hindi tayo lalabas. Ito po. Yan. So, ko lang din pala i-share po ito. Ayan. So, kanina I was able to mention po, no, to ensure reliability, we have to detect the Cronbach alpha. Ayan. Of the test. Share ko na rin para halos malapit sa topic natin. Ayan. So nakikita niyo po itong sabi natin kanina, gumagamit tayo ng SPSS to ensure yung reliability ng test, yung inter-item consistency. Okay. So what we do is that we are going to get the scores from the pilot testing. Okay? Pagkatapos, i-check natin, kumusta yung question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and to 9. Tapos, ito po yung Cronbach alpha if item deleted. Yan. So, kumusta na? Kaya ba natin i-identify kung ano yung bad item at saka good item po dito? Sige nga, pwede po sa chat. Yung mga tatanggalin nating items. Kasi ang kanyang current, ito po, no, in Cronbach alpha daw, kapag yung question 1 ay natanggal, magiging 0.767. Pero pag ang question 2 natanggal, magiging 0.783. Pag ang question 3 tinanggal, magiging 0.767. Question 4, question 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ayan. So, can we now identify ano po dito yung items na kapag tinanggal ay mag-i-improve lalo yung test? Sige po, pwede po natin tingnan ang ating list po dito. Para lang po alam ko din kung naiintindihan niyo po ako. Or magpo-proceed na ba tayo sa next? Ano kaya ang mga item siya yung pag tinanggal, mas mag-i-increase po yung reliability o yung inter-item consistency ng mga item. Okay. Sige. Thank you po, Ma'am Racel. Yeah, so I need to repeat. Nakita kasi yung time, baka yung activity natin ay mag-focus na lang tayo sa reliability. Ayan. So kanina po, meron tayong types of reliability, which is for stability, for equivalence, and homogeneous. Gusto nating i-establish yung test natin kanina, for example, yung self-concept scale. Di po ba? Gusto natin sure, sige, tingnan ko kung consistent, can the test consistently measure self-concept? Sige, stability. Test 3 test tayo. 1, July 1, nagbigay ako ng test. Tapos, August 1, nagbigay ako ulit. So, kumusta yung scores niya? Consistent ba? Yan. Through Pearson R po, malalaman kung merong, kung highly reliable yung test mo. Kung consistent yung scores dun sa first take at saka sa second take. Ayan. May test, retest, reliability siya. It could be, okay po. Sige, parallel form naman, so dalawang test. Okay, tapos may 2 sets of test, 2 testing session, tapos ganun ulit yung mga scores, i-compare sa Pearson R. Yan. Kapag mataas yung reliability, we can say na through parallel form reliability, there is an equivalence. Like regardless of anumang form yan, form A, form B, equivalent lang yung test. You can consistently measure the construct. Homogeneity, so yun tayo sa sweet half kanina, yung hinahati lang yung hinahati lang yung isang mahabang test into 2. Yan. Homogeneous ba? Same ba yung construct na minimeasure ng 1 to 50 at ng 51 to 100 na test? Ang inter-item consistency, ito po yun yung gusto kong i-share kanina. Inter-item consistency yung Cronbach alpha. Tapos, ang goal kasi po nito ay to see the relationship of other items with another item. Kaya ito po yun kanina, yung example ko ng SPSS output. Ayan. Ng reliability testing. Yan. Makikita natin yung relationship ng mga ito, ayan, ng item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, sa iba pang mga items. Yun. Kasi, ayan po, nakikita natin, no, nag-iiba yung Cronbach alpha kapag may nawala. Yan. Kapag may nawala, pwedeng tumaas. Kapag may nawala, pwedeng bumaba. Ayan. Ayun po yun. Correct. Cronbach alpha. Kaya ito may label, Cronbach alpha if item deleted. Talagang sa SPSS lang po ito na-identify. Sige po. So, kaya na po ba natin ma-detect kung ano dito yung mga bad and good item? Kapag yung question 1 po, tinanggal, sabi ang Cronbach alpha ng scale ay magiging 0.767 na lang. Kapag yung item 2 tinanggal, magiging 0.783 na lang. Kasi ano na lang to, without the question number 2, question 1, 3, 4, 5 na. Ito na yung magiging result, 0.783. Yan. Sige po. Okay na po ba? Thank you po, Rosella. I really appreciate it when you tell me po kung kulang, kung kailangan ko pang i-explain ulit. Okay. Good. Ayan po, no? So ito, yung question number 6, pwedeng bad item to, no? Kasi nung natanggal si question 6, tumaas lalo yung item, yung Cronbach alpha o yung internal consistency. Ayan. Also, the number 8, correct, Ma'am Leia? Ayan. Ayan, nagets na po ba? Ayan. So yun po yung ginagamit natin to ensure that the test is really reliable. This usually happens po for personality tests. For cognitive tests, we often use test retest. Pero pag mga personality, it's more of homogeneity test. Ayan. Kapag personality po, usually yan. Homogeneity, for stability naman, intelligence. Kaya nga, di ba, is the intelligence really stable? Tapos usually, ang ginagamit pa natin is test retest. So, yun ang mga issues sa testing. Okay? Tapos, balik tayo dito. Yan. So, ito po yung sa inter-item correlation naman, although, ito sa Cronbach alpha. Okay, yung inter-item consistency. Ito naman yung inter-item correlation, pero magkaiba po ito. Yung inter-item correlation would check the relationship between question 1 and question 2, question 1 and question 3, question 1 and 4, same with other items. Okay? And then, nakita natin, syempre, may perfect correlation yung scores ng question 1 to question 1 kasi same lang naman yun eh. Yan. Pero yung mga question na ito, yung item ng, ito ang relationship nila ay 0.2, ito 0.1, 0.16, 0.15, 0.048, 0.283, 0.515. Okay lang ba yan pag ganyan? Actually, okay po. Kasi ibig sabihin, di ba sabi po natin, ang item pool ay possible items that could measure a sample of behavior. Yun. O kapag ang question 1 mo ay ako ay masayahin, tapos ang question 2 mo rin ay ako ay madaling patawanin. Parehas lang po yun. So pwedeng ang lalabas din na item ay ang correlation nila ay 0.8. Wala kang ibang sample of behavior na nagawa. Ayan, puro lang focus sa pagiging madaling patawanin. Kung self-concept yun. Diba? Ayan. So kapag mababa yung inter-item correlation like this one, 0.2, 0.1, okay po yun. It means that you are measuring a different sample of behavior. Okay? Pero kapag mataas yung correlation, ibig sabihin parang doublet item lang sila. Doublet item. Measuring one construct or one behavior. Pwede nang tanggalin yung isa. Okay pa? Ayan. Questions so far po? Okay. Yan. So, sige. 11 for 20 minutes po, no? Let's try to see or let's try to gauge our knowledge, our familiarity with different tests. Okay, about that measures intelligence, career, and personality. Okay? Sige po. So I'll be showing you different characteristics of that test and then you have to tell me kung ano po yung test na ito. Okay po tayo? Sige. Number 1, what test is widely used to measure personality, disposition, and preferences? It is also used dichotomous types such as extra versus introversion, sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, judging versus perceiving. You may sensing versus intuition, thinking versus feeling, judging. Hi! Tingnan nga natin. Correct po, no? It's Myers, correct. Myers-Briggs typology, type indicator. It's a widely used test to measure personality, disposition, and preference created by Myers and Briggs. Yan. That utilizes 166 items. We also know that it is based on Carl Jung's theory of perception and judgment. Yan, MBTI. So may mga iba't ibang personality because of different typologies. How about this test talk? Good job. Number 2, what test is commonly known as or is known as a self-report personality inventory? Actually, madami to. Pero self-report which is used also for clinical setting. Sabihin ko na lang. It's the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, which is also used to diagnose and treat patients for ages 18 and above. It requires 6 grade reading levels and takes about 60 to 90 minutes to complete the 567 questions. So imagine talagang when you establish a psychological test, yung validity, reliability, standardization, yan, yung mga details na to alam natin. Okay. How about this test? Ayan. It contains a list of problems wherein subjects who check an excessive number of items are those who have difficulties. Anong test po yun? Subjects who check an excessive number of items are those with difficulties. So they just have to check kung ano yung mga difficulties nila. Familiar po? Yes, what kind of checklist? Anong tawag po doon? Anong name ng checklist na yon? Na malalaman mo ng mga problem ng subject. Okay. Anyone? Baka nag-guess yun na rin po ito. Oo, malapit na. Ito po yun, Mooney Problem Checklist. Diba? Yan yung yan yung pinaka well-recognized Mooney Problem Checklist. Yan. How about this one po? It's a test that includes 13 skills that measures managerial potential, tough-mindedness, creativity, and operating style. Itong test na ito ay usually ginagamit po talaga for HR setting and hindi siya ginagamit for clinical setting. Pwede rin to for guidance testing, especially sa mga fourth year graduating natin na students to assess how ready they are sa work. Okay, familiar? The 13 skills that measures managerial potential, tough-mindedness, creativity, and operating styles. Ito po ay yan, California Psychological Inventory. Yan, California Psychological Inventory at ang dami pa niyang mga mini-measure. Then, 20 skills divided into 4 classes such as poise, self-assurance, interpersonal effectiveness, socialization, maturity, responsibility, achievement potential, intellectual efficiency, and interest modes. Yun. So again, this test is used often in industrial and not in clinical setting. What is a test that includes general activity, restraint, ascendance, leadership, sociability, emotional stability, objectivity, friendliness, thoughtfulness, personal relations, and masculinity? May masculinity. Siya lang po yan. Yan ang pinaka madali siyang tandaan because of that. Yan. So kapag mababa yung score niya sa masculinity, syempre mataas yung femininity niya. Ito po ay ang Guilford-Zimmermann Temperament Survey. Ayan. Yung Guilford-Zimmermann Temperament Survey. Opo, pwede ma'am. Kasi sa naman tayo, trained naman tayo for psychological testing talaga. Pero syempre, depende sa test, madam ha, baka mamaya projective test to. So we have to ensure then if we're competent to interpret. Yan. So ito naman, ito madali lang to. What is a report assessment that measures 16 normal adult personality dimension? Diba? Correct. 16 PF. So gawa po ito ni Raymond Cattell. It's a self-report assessment that measures 16 normal adult personality dimensions and provides scores for 5 global factors such as extraversion, excuse me po, anxiety, tough-mindedness, independence, and self-control. So these are the factors, 16 PF. Pero ayan, may naka-align siya sa 5 global, pero 16 talaga yung factors. So, ito po. What test measures abasement, achievement, affiliation, aggression, autonomy, blame, avoidance, counteraction, defendance, dominance, exhibition, harm avoidance, infavoidance, or yung nurturance, order, play, rejection, sentience, sex, succurrence, and understanding. Ito, may term ng succurrence. Medyo may clue kung anong theory siya. Familiar po? Ayan. Ang sagot po ay ito. Ayan. Edwards Personal Preference Schedule. Ayan. Ang succurrence ay isang factor or isang concept po sa theory ni Murray. Kaya ang EPPS ay psychological test based on Murray's theory. It's also using ipsative scoring. Ipsative, yan. Just for your note-taking po. Ipsative scoring, which means that the scoring is when the person is going to answer the test, merong fourth choice, tapos saan man siya, ang piliin man niya ay A or B or C, dun sa mga choices, malalaman kung saan siya, kung dito ba siya sa dominance or sa infavoidance, ayun. Kung ano yung personality niya. Okay. Ito naman. What test is the aid to men and women in making an occupational choice, either vocationally or professionally oriented? Is the aid to men and women in making an occupational choice, either vocationally or professionally oriented? Ito po yun, California Occupational Preference Survey or COPS. Yan, it has 14 scales representing these clusters: science, professional or skilled. Ayan, kasi para malaman yung fitness niya kung pang vocational siya or for professional, yung mga blue collar and white collar jobs. Ayan. Kaya pwedeng science pero professional, science pero skilled na leading to more manual mechanical labor. Ayan. Technical, professional, technical skilled, outdoor business, professional, business skilled. Ayan. So yun po yung COPS. Identify niya kung ikaw ba ay for professional or white collar job or pang blue collar job. Yan. Ito po. What test get information on your personality, interest, abilities, and skills? Para malaman mo kung ano ang trabaho na fit sa'yo based on your personality, interest, ability, and skills. Okay. Familiar po tayo dito, the self-directed search. Okay, by si Holland po, no? Find careers that maximize your personality, interest, abilities, and skills. Ay, meron din po yung RIASEC. Ayan. So what test or what intelligence test can be administered for 2.5 to 7 years and 3 months of age? It's an individual test that can be administered 2.5 to 7 years and 3 months. Parang kanina po nabanggit na rin natin yun. Mga pang preschooler, bago mag-grade 1, intelligence test. Ito pong, yan, WIPC, or the Wechsler's Preschool and Primary Scale of Intelligence. Ayan, WIPC. Pero, ang counterpart niya ay ito. The test that can be given for 6 to 16 years and 11 months. Correct, na yan na. Tama po. The Wechsler Intelligence Scale for Children Revised. Yung WISC. Ito, ano naman to? The test can be given for ages 16 and beyond. Intelligence po. 16 and beyond. WISC po yung kanina ha. Ayan, ito naman ay correct. No, WAIS this time. Ang WAIS po and the Wechsler test or scales, they have 7 verbal scales. Vocabulary, similarities, arithmetic, digit span, information, comprehension, letters, number sequencing. Meron ding performance scales. O yung picture completion, digit symbol coding, block design, matrix reasoning, picture arrangement, yung mga non-verbal. Symbol search and object assembly. Kaya kanina, di ba, may situation tayo na, sa group test, nakita mo na ang taas, nasa 98 or 99 percentile yung score. And you want to ensure kung ito ba ay fit for acceleration. Pwedeng ito yung ibigay. Para mas customized, individualized yung testing, makita natin ano yung mga, sa 14 scales na yan, saan siya talaga nag-excel. Actually, Ma'am Roselia, pwede naman talaga, pero yun, dapat meron tayong, Ma'am Zoraida, ito pong WAIS. Yan. Pero dapat meron tayong, ano rin talaga, training for this. Kasi ang WAIS po ay medyo, ano po ito, complex. Complex siya i-administer kasi individual, you have to really observe the person, lalo na ito itong 7 performance skills. In-observe mo siya, tinatimeran mo siya. Yan, tapos may mga scoring yung real-time scoring. Kung na-achieve ba niya yung block design na nando sa picture, nagaya ba niya, ayun. Kaya kailangan ng intensive training talaga for this po. Tama, with proper training and supervision. Pero ang mga paper and pen test kasi basta may manual ka tapos babasahin mo yung instruction, babasahin mo yung scale, madali na lang eh. Pero pag mga individualized testing talaga, proper training and supervision, para rin siyang projective test po. Ayan. So, Ma'am Zoraida, pag 16 years old and above, ayan, WAIS. Okay, kapag 2.5 to 7, WIPC. Sa school age children yung WISC. Ito naman po yung isa. What is a 45 to 90-minute intelligence test designed to measure cognitive ability as well as provide analysis of the pattern of an individual's cognitive development? 45 to 90-minute intelligence test designed to measure cognitive ability as well as to provide analysis of the pattern of an individual's, meaning to say it's an individual test dan, individual's cognitive development. Ito po ay ang SB5 or the Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale. Ito ang unique sa kanya. The scale is used for individuals aged 2 to 89 years. Ayan. Age 2 to 89 years, pero syempre, yung interpretation nagbe-vary, depende po sa age, depende sa norm. Yan. What test is used in the assessment of brain damage? Brain damage. Familiar po kung anong mga test yon or magbigay ng isa? Tingnan natin kung baka yun. Brain damage. Correct. Okay. Bender visual motor gestal test. Yung Halstead-Drayton kasi ay test battery. Sige. Mamaya, meron din tayong item for that. But I want to highlight that Bender is actually based on, is actually considered also as a personality test. Kasi lalo na for children, it reveals something about their emotional stability. Baka kaya hindi masagutan dahil hindi emotionally stable. Yan. But it is used to assess brain damage and it consists of 9 geometric figures that the subject simply needs to copy. Yan. Ito yung card. Gagayahin mo kung ito ba, yung figure ay parang pa-triangle. Yan. The scoring is based on the errors made. Ito naman. The nonverbal group test that measures general intelligence and can be administered from age 50 to early adulthood. Nonverbal group test. Nonverbal group test that measures general intelligence. Okay. Ang sagot po ay Ravens. Nakita ko na rin kanina yung Ravens, no? Ayan. Sa nonverbal test can be administered by group. How about this one po? It is designed to provide an estimate intelligence relatively free of cultural and language influences. It's also correct po. Ayan, culture fair intelligence test. And it's paper and pencil procedure that covers 3 levels. So yung scale 1 for ages 4 to 8 and mentally disabled adults. Ang scale 2 is age 8 to 12 and randomly selected adults. And scale 3 for high school age and above average adults. Yan. Culture fair. A multi-aptitude test battery consisting of 12 tests developed specially for vocational counseling in schools and job placement settings. Ano po yun? A multi-aptitude test battery consisting of 12 tests developed specially for vocational counseling in schools and job placement settings. Ito po yun. Ayan, General Aptitude Test Battery. General Aptitude Test Battery. Multi-aptitude test. Kaya General Aptitude. Tapos yan, 12 tests. 12 different tests. Ayan. General Aptitude Test Battery. Let's see. Ito po. Nakita ko to kanina sa mga sagot eh. What test is not only used to diagnose neuropsychological dysfunction but also used to establish a baseline function against which to measure future functioning as well? Okay. Ito pong Halstead-Drayton Neuropsychology Battery. Yan. This test is not only used to diagnose neuropsychological dysfunction. Meron siyang the baseline function against which to measure future functioning. Ayan. It has 3 batteries, one for children age 5 to 8, one for children age 9 to 14, and one for adults. Okay. Each battery include a minimum of 14 separate tests which are scored as 26 variables. Dami, no? But again, bakit merong for different ages? To provide a baseline function. Sa future, tingnan natin kapag si 5 to 8, ayan, naging 14 na. Kaya, ayan, pag naging adult na. Okay. What is a group-administered multi-level mental ability battery designed for use in grades K to 12? So kanina yung general aptitude test para to sa adults, no, sa mga college students. Pero ito for grades K to 12. Ano po yun? Yung mental ability battery. Mental ability battery. Familiar po tayo dito? Yan. ALSAT o yung Otis Lennon School Ability Test. It's a group-administered test that are often used to predict success in school, which takes about 60 to 75 minutes to administer. So yung ALSAT po, ayan, school ability test, but it can also be aptitude test, especially if it's administered on the onset before the school year starts, and it can be done or it can be administered as an achievement test after the school year to kasi may baseline data tayo, and then to assess how much has improved. Okay, so kung dito yung siyang percentile, baka umangat na siya next. Yan. Again, it can provide an idea kung paano ka-effective yung teachers sa pagtuturo, can also assess kung gaano nag-develop yung bata through time. Okay, so marami pa tayong mga sample po ng different types of tests. Bago mag-end ulit yung next session natin, magbibigay tayo ulit ng ganito hanggang maging familiar po tayo sa mga tests. Okay, before we end, I just want to know saang area po ng psych testing ako dapat mag-focus. Para next session po ay yun yung mas i-highlight natin. Actually, we still have more to go. We still have to again discuss po yung or review the technical, the characteristics and validity. Although napahapyawan naman natin during when I showed you the test construction process, pero we're going to talk about the statistical foundations of testing also. Yan. Sa stats. Okay. Sige po. Yan. I'll be providing you with some exercises. So, pwede po tayo magdala next week or next review session ng paper and pen natin. Okay? Sige po. Salamat po sa lahat. Ingat po kayo and happy lunch.
Thank you po.